He laughed at the judge, right there in open court. A 17-year-old boy accused of murder, and he couldn't stop smiling. The victim's mother was sobbing 10 feet away. The jury sat frozen in shock. But Liam? He looked bored. He yawned. He checked his nails. He whispered jokes to his lawyer because he had a plan, a foolproof plan. He was 17, just 17. In his mind, that meant he was basically immune. Juvenile court, light sentence, out by 21. He'd already told his friends he'd get away with it. He'd bragged about it, joked about it, even posted about it. But here's what he didn't know. Every single message he'd ever sent was sitting in a folder on the prosecutor's desk. The Snapchat messages he thought disappeared in 10 seconds, they didn't. They were recovered. Every word, every photo, every confession. And when the prosecutor hit play, Liam's smirk died, because his own words were about to send him to prison for life. Stories like this remind us that justice always finds its way. If you believe in accountability, subscribe now and tell us what you think below. This is how it all began. 3 months earlier, Riverside was the definition of safe. Pretty houses, clean streets, a town where nothing bad ever happened. 16-year-old Khloe lived 3 blocks from the high school. She walked there every morning. Everyone knew her, teachers loved her, friends adored her. She had colleges already sending her letters. Her future was bright, blindingly bright. On the morning of September 14th, she kissed her mom goodbye and headed out the door. She was humming a song. She had her backpack, her phone, and her whole life ahead of her. Her mom watched her walk down the sidewalk and disappear around the corner. That was the last time anyone saw Khloe alive. By dinner time, her phone was going straight to voicemail. By midnight, her parents were in full panic. And by sunrise the next day, search dogs were heading into the woods. What they found there would haunt that town forever. Khloe Martin was the kind of girl who made her parents believe the world was still good. She was 16, with sandy blonde hair that caught the sunlight and a laugh that could fill an entire room. She wasn't just popular, she was genuinely kind, the type who'd sit with the new kid at lunch, the type who'd stay after class to help someone struggling with homework. Her bedroom walls were covered with acceptance letters from summer programs, scholarships, awards. She'd already mapped out her next 10 years, right down to the college she wanted and the career she'd chase. Medicine, she'd decided. She wanted to save lives. Her parents would tell anyone who'd listen how proud they were. And Khloe? She never let it go to her head. She was humble, grounded, real. On the morning of September 14th, everything seemed perfectly normal. Khloe woke up at 6:30, like always. She showered, got dressed, and came downstairs to the smell of coffee brewing. Her mom, Diana, was packing lunches at the kitchen counter. Her dad, Robert, was already gone for work. It was just another Tuesday, just another routine morning in a routine life. Khloe grabbed a granola bar, and her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and smiled. Probably her best friend, Emma, sending memes before first period. Diana looked up and reminded her about the math test. Khloe groaned playfully, but nodded. She promised she'd studied enough. She slung her backpack over one shoulder and headed for the door. Diana called after her. "Text me when you get there." Khloe turned, rolled her eyes in that affectionate teenage way, and said, "Mom, it's like a 10-minute walk." But she smiled. That smile lingered in Diana's memory for weeks afterward. It was warm. It was safe. It was the smile of a girl who had no idea what was waiting for her. Khloe stepped outside into the cool September air. The sky was clear. Birds were chirping. Neighbors were pulling out of driveways. It was peaceful, picture perfect. She put in her earbuds, scrolled to her favorite playlist, and started walking. Her white sneakers tapped rhythmically against the sidewalk. She passed Mrs. de Kellerman's house, waved at old Mr. Cho watering his roses, and turned the corner toward the shortcut everyone used. The shortcut was a dirt path that ran along the edge of the local nature reserve. It saved about 5 minutes, and most students took it without thinking twice. The trees on either side were thick and green, forming a natural tunnel of shade. Khloe had walked it 100 times, 1,000 times. It felt as safe as her own driveway. But that morning, someone was waiting. Someone who'd been planning. Someone who knew her routine better than she did. Khloe's phone buzzed again as she entered the path. She pulled it out, still walking, still humming along to her music. The message was from a Snapchat account she didn't recognize, but the preview text made her pause. It said, "Hey, it's Liam. Need your help with something. Can you meet me by the ridge? It's urgent." Liam Turner. Khloe knew him, sort of. He was a year older, a senior, quiet kid, kept to himself. They'd worked on a group project once, maybe twice. He seemed harmless, a little awkward, but harmless. Khloe hesitated for just a second, then typed back, "Right now, I have a test first period." His response came instantly. "It'll only take 5 minutes, please. It's about the college essay. You said you'd help me remember?" She didn't remember saying that, but she also didn't want to be rude. Khloe was the type who helped. It's who she was. She glanced at the time. She had maybe 15 minutes before the bell. The ridge wasn't far. She could make it. She sent back a quick okay and changed direction, veering deeper into the woods. The path to the ridge was narrower, less traveled. The trees closed in tighter, and the morning light struggled to break through the canopy. Khloe's footsteps crunched over dry leaves and twigs. She turned down her music slightly, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. No birds now, no distant traffic. Just silence. She reached the clearing by the ridge and looked around. No one was there. She pulled out her phone to text Liam again, but before she could type, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see him coming up the path. And she did. Liam was there, but something was wrong. His expression wasn't friendly. It wasn't awkward or nervous. It was cold, blank, empty. Khloe's stomach twisted. Instinct kicked in a second too late. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask what was going on, but the words never came. Liam moved fast, faster than she expected. There was no conversation, no explanation. What happened next in those woods was brutal, calculated, cruel. Khloe fought. She fought hard. Her nails clawed. Her voice screamed. But the reserve was empty that early in the morning, and no one heard. It was over in minutes. Liam stood over her, breathing hard, staring down at what he'd done. And then, in a moment that would seal his fate forever, he pulled out his phone. He opened Snapchat. He took a picture. Not of remorse, not of panic, but of pride. He typed a caption, added a joke, and sent it to his friends. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Khloe's body hidden beneath the trees. By 8:15 that morning, Khloe's first period teacher marked her absent. By noon, Diana had called the school 3 times. By 3 in the afternoon, Robert had left work early and was driving through town looking for her. By 6 that evening, the police were involved. And by midnight, over 100 volunteers were combing the woods with flashlights, calling her name into the darkness. The search went on through the night, desperate, frantic, heartbreaking. Then, just after sunrise, a volunteer named Mike Herrera saw something that didn't belong, a flash of color against the brown and green of the forest floor. He moved closer. His heart sank. It was Khloe's backpack, and a few feet away, partially covered by leaves, was Khloe. Mike fell to his knees and screamed for help. The crime scene was declared at 6:42 in the morning. Yellow tape went up fast, snapping and fluttering in the early wind. Detectives arrived in waves. First the local police, then county, and then state forensic teams. The woods, so quiet just hours before, were now swarming with people. But none of them spoke much. There was a heavy, suffocating silence that came with scenes like this, especially when the victim was a child. Khloe's body lay in a small clearing about 30 yards off the main path. The leaves around her were disturbed, scattered. There were signs of a struggle, deep gouges in the dirt where her hands had clawed, broken branches, a torn piece of fabric snagged on a low bush. It was clear she had fought. She had fought for her life. Lead Detective Karen Alvarez stood at the perimeter, her jaw tight, her eyes scanning every inch of the scene. She'd been in law enforcement for 19 years. She'd seen horrible things. But this one hit different. Maybe because Khloe looked so much like her own daughter. Maybe because the violence was so extreme, so personal. Alvarez pulled on her gloves and stepped carefully into the scene, her boots pressing into the soft earth. The forensic photographer was already at work, the camera shutter clicking in rapid bursts. Each flash illuminated Khloe's face for a split second. Eyes closed, skin pale, gone. Alvarez knelt down beside her, her throat tightening. She forced herself to stay professional, to observe, to note every detail. Khloe's hands showed defensive wounds. Her nails were broken. There was tissue under them. That was good. That was evidence. The medical examiner, Dr. Paul Granger, arrived just after 7. He was a short man with silver hair and a permanent look of exhaustion. He'd been doing this job for 30 years, and it had aged him twice that. He approached the body slowly, his medical kit in hand, and knelt beside Alvarez. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked. Then he let out a long, slow breath. "She fought hard," he said quietly. Alvarez nodded. "I know." Granger began his preliminary examination. He checked her pupils, her skin temperature, the lividity pooling in her lower extremities. He estimated time of death at somewhere between 7 and 9 the previous morning. That meant she'd been out here, alone, for nearly 24 hours before anyone found her. The thought made Alvarez's chest ache. Granger continued his assessment, taking samples, documenting injuries. The cause of death appeared to be blunt force trauma combined with asphyxiation. It wasn't quick. It wasn't painless. Whoever did this had wanted her to suffer. Alvarez stood and stepped back, letting the forensic team do their work. She scanned the surrounding area. Whoever killed Khloe had approached from the south, based on the footprints leading into the clearing. And they'd left the same way. The prints were clear in the soft dirt. Size 11, shoe, male, most likely. The tread pattern was distinct. New Balance, maybe. Or something similar. Forensic techs were already making casts of the prints, preserving every ridge and groove. That print could be the key to everything. But there was something else. Something that made Alvarez pause. About 15 feet from Khloe's body, near the base of an old oak tree, there was a disturbance in the leaves. She walked over, crouched down, and used a gloved hand to brush them aside. Underneath was a phone. Not Khloe's. The case was black, generic, cracked screen. It looked like it had been dropped. Or thrown. Alvarez's heart rate picked up. She called over one of the techs. "Bag this, carefully." The tech nodded and slipped the phone into an evidence bag, labeling it with the time and location. That phone could be nothing, or it could be everything. Either way, it was going straight to the cybercrimes unit. By 9 that morning, the scene was fully processed. Khloe's body was carefully placed onto a stretcher and covered with a white sheet. The sight of it being carried out of the woods made several of the younger officers turn away. The volunteers, who'd been searching all night, stood in a somber line as the coroner's van drove past. Some of them were crying. Others just stared. Mike Herrera, the man who'd found her, sat on the bumper of a police cruiser with his head in his hands. And he'd been a volunteer firefighter for 12 years. He'd seen death, but not like this. Not a kid. A detective approached him gently and asked if he'd seen anyone else in the woods that morning. Mike shook his head. "No one. It was just me and the search dog." Back at the station, the investigation was already ramping up. A conference room had been converted into a command center. Whiteboards lined the walls. Photos of Khloe were pinned up alongside maps of the nature reserve. Alvarez stood at the front of the room, briefing her team. "We have a timeline. Khloe left her house at 7:30 yesterday morning. Her phone last pinged at 7:53, right near the ridge area where we found her. That gives us a tight window. Whoever did this knew where she'd be and when." One of the younger detectives, Marcus Lynn, raised his hand. "Do we know why she went off the main path? That's not her usual route to school." Alvarez shook her head. "Not yet, but we're pulling her phone records now. We'll know who she was talking to." Within the hour, the phone records came back. Khloe's cell provider had sent over a full log of her messages, calls, and app activity from the previous 48 hours. The cyber crimes analyst, a sharp woman named Tanya Brooks, spread the printouts across the table. "Okay," Tanya said, running her finger down the log. "Most of her activity is normal. Texts to her mom, her best friend Emma, a group chat with her volleyball team. But here," she tapped a line on the page. "At 7:49 yesterday morning, she received a message through Snapchat, and she responded. Twice." Alvarez leaned in. "Can we see the messages?" Tanya shook her head. "Yeah, Snapchat auto-deletes, but we can see the metadata. The account that messaged her is linked to a username, L. Turner Official." Alvarez's eyes narrowed. "Turner, that name mean anything to anyone?" Marcus pulled out his laptop and started typing. Within seconds, he had a hit. "Liam Turner, 17 years old, senior at Riverside High, same school as Khloe." The room went still. Alvarez crossed her arms. "Does he have a record?" Marcus scrolled. "Nothing major. One incident report from 2 years ago. Got into a fight at school. Suspended for 3 days. But nothing since." Alvarez nodded slowly. "Get me his address and his phone number. We're going to pay him a visit." Tanya held up a hand. "There's more. I ran a trace on the IP address linked to that Snapchat account. It's registered to a home address on Maple Street. Same neighborhood as Khloe." Alvarez felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't random. This was someone close, someone who knew her. 20 minutes later, Alvarez and Marcus pulled up in front of a modest 2-story house on Maple Street. The lawn was neatly trimmed. A basketball hoop hung over the garage. It looked like every other house on the block. Normal, safe, innocent. Alvarez stepped out of the car and straightened her jacket. Marcus followed. They walked up the driveway and knocked on the front door. For a moment, there was nothing. Then footsteps. The door opened. Standing there in sweatpants and a hoodie was a teenage boy. Tall, thin, dark hair. He looked at them with mild curiosity. No fear, no panic. Just casual indifference. "Yeah?" he said. Alvarez held up her badge. "Liam Turner?" The boy nodded. "That's me." Alvarez's eyes locked onto his. "We need to talk." Liam didn't flinch. He didn't tense. He just stood there in the doorway, one hand on the frame, looking at the two detectives like they were selling magazine subscriptions. "Talk about what?" he asked. His tone was flat, almost bored. Alvarez studied his face. No sweat on his brow, no rapid blinking, no nervous swallowing. Nothing. Most 17-year-olds would be rattled by police showing up at their door. But not this kid. He looked completely relaxed. "We're investigating the death of Khloe Martin," Alvarez said, watching his reaction carefully. "We understand you knew her." Liam tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to remember. Then he nodded. "Yeah, Khloe. We go to the same school." "Why? What happened?" His voice didn't change. No shock, no concern, and just curiosity. Marcus stepped forward. "She was found dead this morning, in the woods near the nature reserve." Liam's eyebrows lifted just a fraction. "Oh, wow, that's crazy." That was it. That was his entire response. Alvarez felt her jaw tighten. She'd been doing this long enough to know when something was off. And this was off. Way off. "When was the last time you saw Khloe?" she asked. Liam shrugged. "I don't know, maybe last week, in the hallway at school. We didn't really hang out or anything." Alvarez nodded slowly. "Did you message her recently?" Liam hesitated, just for a second. Then he shook his head. "No, I don't think so." Alvarez pulled out her phone and showed him a screenshot of the Snapchat metadata. "This account, L. Turner Official, that's you, right?" Liam glanced at the screen. His expression didn't change. "Yeah, but that's my Snapchat." Alvarez tilted her head. "So you did message her?" Liam shrugged again. "Maybe. I message a lot of people. I don't remember everyone." Marcus cut in. "You messaged her yesterday morning at 7:49, right before she disappeared." Liam's eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Alvarez. "I honestly don't remember. Like I said, I message a lot of people." His voice was calm. Too calm. Alvarez decided to push. "Where were you yesterday morning between 7 and 9? Liam didn't even pause. "Here, at home. I was playing video games." Alvarez made a note. "Anyone who can confirm that?" Liam nodded. "My mom. She was home." Right on cue, a woman appeared behind Liam. She was in her early 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing yoga pants and a concerned expression. "What's going on?" she asked. And her voice sharp with protective instinct. Alvarez introduced herself and Marcus. "We're investigating a homicide. We just need to ask your son a few questions." The color drained from the woman's face. "A homicide? Liam, what is she talking about?" Liam turned to his mother, his face the picture of innocence. "A girl from school died. They're asking everyone questions." His mother, Rebecca Turner, looked back at the detectives. "My son didn't have anything to do with whatever happened. He was here all morning yesterday. With me." Alvarez nodded. "And you can confirm he never left the house?" Rebecca nodded firmly. "He was in his room playing those video games. I could hear him through the ceiling." Alvarez exchanged a glance with Marcus. The alibi was weak. Hearing someone upstairs didn't mean they were actually there. But they didn't have enough to push harder. Not yet. "We'd like Liam to come down to the station to give a formal statement," Alvarez said. "Just routine." Rebecca's protective instincts kicked into overdrive. "Absolutely not. Not without a lawyer." Alvarez kept her tone measured. "He's not under arrest, Mrs. Turner. We're just trying to establish a timeline. He's free to refuse." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Then he refuses." Liam looked between his mother and the detectives. Then he smiled, just slightly, just enough for Alvarez to notice. "It's fine, Mom. I'll go. I want to help." Rebecca looked uncertain, but Liam was already stepping outside. "Let me grab my shoes." 20 minutes later, Liam was sitting in interview room 2 at the Riverside Police Department. The room was small, beige walls, a metal table, 3 chairs. A camera mounted in the corner. Liam sat with his hands folded on the table, looking around like he was waiting for a dentist appointment. Alvarez sat across from him. Marcus stood by the door. Alvarez started the recording and stated the date, time, and who was present. Then she looked at Liam. "Thanks for coming in, Liam. Like I said, this is just routine. We're talking to everyone who knew Khloe." Liam nodded. "Sure, no problem." Alvarez opened a folder. "Tell me about your relationship with Khloe." Liam leaned back in his chair. "We didn't have a relationship. We were just classmates." Alvarez made a note. "But you messaged her yesterday morning." Liam shrugged. "I guess. I honestly don't remember what it was about." Alvarez didn't break eye contact. "You told her to meet you by the ridge. You said it was urgent?" Liam's expression didn't change. "I don't think that was me. Maybe someone hacked my account or something." Alvarez let that sit for a moment. Then she shifted gears. "Walk me through your morning yesterday, from the time you woke up." Liam scratched his neck. "I woke up around 7, made some cereal, went upstairs, played Call of Duty until like noon." Alvarez leaned forward slightly. "You didn't leave the house at all?" Liam shook his head. "Nope." Alvarez watched him closely. "Not even for a walk? Fresh air?" Liam smiled. "Nope. I'm kind of a homebody." Marcus spoke up from the door. "What were you wearing yesterday?" Liam looked over at him. "I don't know. Sweatpants, a hoodie, same thing I wear every day." Marcus nodded. "You still have those clothes?" Liam hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Probably in the laundry." Alvarez made another note. She could feel it now. The cracks. They were small, but they were there. "Liam, did you know Khloe was walking through the nature reserve yesterday morning?" Liam shook his head. "No. How would I know that?" Alvarez leaned back. "You tell me." Liam's smile faded just slightly. "I didn't know. I was home." The interview went on for another 30 minutes. Alvarez asked the same questions in different ways. Liam's answers stayed consistent. Too consistent. Rehearsed almost. Finally, Alvarez closed the folder. "Okay, Liam, that's all for now. We'll be in touch if we have more questions." Liam stood up, looking relieved. "Cool. Can I go?" Alvarez nodded. "You're free to leave." Liam walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "I hope you guys find whoever did it. Khloe was nice." And then he left. Marcus waited until the door closed before speaking. "That kid's lying," Alvarez nodded. "I know, but we need proof." She pulled out her phone and called Tanya in cybercrimes. "I need you to dig into Liam Turner's digital life. Everything. Social media, cloud storage, emails, texts. I want to know every site he's visited in the last month." Tanya's voice crackled through the line. "You got it." That afternoon, Alvarez and Marcus drove back to Liam's neighborhood. But this time, they weren't going to his house. They were canvassing, knocking on doors, asking neighbors if they'd seen anything unusual yesterday morning. Most people hadn't. But then they knocked on the door of a man named Gerald Pritchard. He was 72, retired, and spent most of his time tending to his garden. He also had a doorbell camera. "Yesterday morning?" Gerald said, scratching his chin. "Yeah, I was out front watering the roses. Saw the Turner boy walking past around 8, maybe 8:15. Alvarez felt her pulse quicken. "You're sure it was him?" Gerald nodded. "Oh, yeah, I see him all the time. He was wearing a dark hoodie, had a backpack, looked like he was in a hurry." Alvarez and Marcus exchanged a look. Liam had just lied. He said he never left the house, but a witness saw him walking at 8:15, right in the window when Khloe was killed. "Did you see which direction he was headed?" Alvarez asked. Gerald pointed. "Toward the reserve, same direction all the kids take." Alvarez thanked him and asked for a copy of his doorbell footage. Gerald was happy to oblige. Within an hour, Alvarez was back at the station, watching the footage on her computer. And there he was, clear as day. Liam Turner walking past Gerald's house at 8:13 in the morning. Dark hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder, heading toward the woods. Alvarez paused the video and stared at the screen. She had him. Not completely, not yet. But the cracks were widening. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Tanya just called. She found something." Alvarez stood up immediately. "What?" Marcus grinned. "Liam's iCloud account. He had automatic backups enabled. She pulled his Snapchat data from the cloud." Alvarez's eyes went wide. "She got the messages?" Marcus nodded. "Every single one, including the ones he sent to Khloe yesterday morning." Alvarez grabbed her jacket. "Let's go." Down in the cybercrimes lab, Tanya had the messages pulled up on her monitor. Alvarez and Marcus leaned in, reading over her shoulder. The first message was sent at 7:49. "Hey, it's Liam. Need your help with something. Can you meet me by the ridge? It's urgent." Khloe's response came 2 minutes later. "Right now? I have a test first period." Liam's reply was immediate. "It'll only take 5 minutes. Please, it's about the college essay. You said you'd help me remember?" Khloe responded. Okay. That was it. That was the lure. Simple, innocent, deadly. Alvarez felt a cold anger settle into her chest. He'd tricked her. He'd used her kindness against her. But there was more. Tanya scrolled down. These messages were sent after Khloe was already dead. Alvarez's breath caught. The first one was sent at 9:14 in the morning. It was to a friend named Jason. The message read, "Dude, I actually did it." "I can't believe I actually did it." Jason replied, "Did what?" Liam's next message made Alvarez's stomach turn. "I'll tell you later, but it felt amazing." There was a photo attached. Tanya hesitated before opening it. "You sure you want to see this?" Alvarez nodded. Tanya clicked. The image filled the screen. It was a selfie. Liam's face filled the frame, smiling, his eyes bright with adrenaline. And in the background, barely visible through the trees, was a shape on the ground. A body. Khloe's body. Alvarez had to step back. She put her hand over her mouth. Marcus swore under his breath. Tanya closed the image quickly. "There's more," she said quietly. She pulled up another conversation. This one was from later that night. Liam was talking to someone named Tyler. Tyler asked, "Bro, where were you today?" "You weren't at school." Liam responded, "Had something to take care of." Tyler sent a laughing emoji. "What, like a hit?" Liam replied, "Something like that, LOL." Then came the message that sealed everything. "Don't worry, I'm 17. They can't do shit to me anyway, LOL." Alvarez stared at the screen. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from fury. This kid had planned it. He'd executed it, he'd bragged about it, and he thought he was untouchable. Alvarez turned to Marcus. "Get a warrant for his house, his phone, his computer, everything." Marcus was already on his phone. On it. Alvarez looked back at the screen one more time, at Liam's smug, smiling face in that photo. "You're done," she whispered. "You just don't know it yet." By 6 that evening, Judge Harold Brennan had signed the search warrant. It was one of the fastest approvals Alvarez had ever seen. Brennan had read the affidavit, looked at the screenshots of Liam's messages, and signed without hesitation. "Bring me something solid," he'd said. Alvarez intended to. At 7:30, 3 patrol cars and an unmarked detective vehicle pulled up in front of the Turner house. The sun was setting. The street was quiet. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Alvarez stepped out first, warrant in hand. Marcus and 4 uniformed officers followed. They walked up the driveway and knocked hard on the door. Rebecca Turner answered, her face immediately shifting from confusion to alarm. "What's going on?" Alvarez held up the warrant. "We have a warrant to search the premises. Step aside, please." Rebecca's face went pale. "You can't just—" Alvarez cut her off. "Yes, we can. The warrant is signed by a judge. You can read it if you'd like." Rebecca snatched the paper and scanned it frantically. Her hands were shaking. "This is insane. My son didn't do anything." Alvarez didn't respond. She nodded to the officers, and they moved past Rebecca into the house. "Liam Turner!" Alvarez called out. "Come downstairs, now." There was a long pause, then footsteps on the stairs. Liam appeared, wearing the same sweatpants and hoodie from earlier. He looked annoyed, not scared. Annoyed. "What now?" he said. Alvarez stepped closer. "We're executing a search warrant. Sit on the couch and don't move." Liam rolled his eyes but complied. Rebecca stood beside him, her arms crossed, glaring at Alvarez. The search was methodical. Officers moved through every room, opening drawers, checking closets, photographing everything. Marcus headed upstairs to Liam's bedroom. It was a typical teenage room. Messy bed, posters on the walls. A gaming setup in the corner with 2 monitors and LED lights. Marcus pulled on gloves and started searching. He checked under the bed first. Nothing but dust and old sneakers. Then the closet. Clothes piled on the floor, shoes stacked haphazardly. Marcus pulled them out one by one, checking the treads. On the 5th pair, he stopped. New Balance, size 11. The treads matched the pattern from the crime scene. He bagged them immediately. "Got something," he called out. Alvarez came upstairs. Marcus held up the shoes. "These match the prints from the woods?" Alvarez's eyes gleamed. "Bag everything in this closet, every piece of clothing." Marcus nodded and started pulling items out. Then he noticed something. In the back corner of the closet, one of the floorboards looked loose. He knelt down and pried it up with his fingers. Underneath was a small, hidden compartment, and inside that compartment was a black garbage bag. Marcus pulled it out carefully. It was heavy. He opened it. Inside were clothes. A dark hoodie. Jeans. Both were stiff with dried blood. Marcus looked up at Alvarez. "We've got him." Alvarez felt a rush of adrenaline. "Bag it. Everything." Downstairs, Liam was still sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone like nothing was happening. Rebecca was pacing. "This is harassment," she kept saying. "We're going to sue." Alvarez ignored her. She walked over to Liam and stood directly in front of him. "Stand up." Liam looked up, irritated. "Why?" Alvarez's voice was ice. Because you're under arrest." The color finally drained from Liam's face. "What? For what?" Alvarez pulled out her cuffs. "For the murder of Khloe Martin. Turn around." Liam's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, he looked genuinely shocked. Rebecca screamed, "No, you can't. He's a minor. He's just a boy." Alvarez snapped the cuffs onto Liam's wrists. "He's a murderer." Liam was read his Miranda rights on the front lawn. Neighbors were fully outside now, watching. Some were recording on their phones. Liam kept his head down, but Alvarez could see his jaw clenching. The arrogance was cracking. Marcus brought down the evidence bags, the shoes, the bloody clothes. Rebecca saw them and nearly collapsed. "Those aren't his," she sobbed. "Someone planted them." But her voice lacked conviction. Deep down, she was starting to realize the truth. Liam was loaded into the back of a patrol car. As the door closed, he looked out the window at his mother, and for just a moment his mask slipped. He looked scared. The car pulled away. Alvarez stood in the driveway, watching it disappear. Marcus came up beside her. "Think he'll confess?" Alvarez shook her head. "Not a chance, but it doesn't matter. We have everything we need." The holding cell at Riverside County Jail was cold and gray. Liam sat on the metal bench, his hands still cuffed, staring at the concrete floor. He'd been there for 3 hours. No phone, no contact, just silence and the occasional echo of footsteps down the hall. His mind was racing. He kept replaying the moment the detective pulled those clothes out of his closet. He'd been so careful. He'd hidden them. He'd planned everything. How did they know where to look? His stomach twisted. For the first time since this all started, real fear crept in. Not guilt, not remorse, just fear of consequences, fear of losing control, fear of being caught. At 11 that night, Alvarez and Marcus entered the interrogation room and waited. A guard brought Liam in a few minutes later. His cuffs were removed, and he sat down slowly, rubbing his wrists. He looked tired now. Smaller somehow. The cocky teenager from earlier was gone. In his place was a boy who was starting to understand the gravity of his situation. Alvarez sat across from him. Marcus stood by the door. The camera in the corner blinked red. Everything was being recorded. Alvarez placed a folder on the table, but didn't open it yet. She just looked at Liam. Let the silence do the work. Liam shifted in his seat. I want a lawyer, he said quietly. Alvarez nodded. That's your right, but before we stop talking, I want you to understand something. We found the clothes, Liam, the ones covered in Khloe's blood. We found the shoes that matched the prints at the scene. We have your Snapchat messages. We have your selfie, the one you took with her body in the background. Liam's eyes widened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Alvarez leaned forward. You thought those messages disappeared, didn't you? You thought Snapchat deleted them, but they didn't. Every single word you sent is sitting in a file on my desk. Every joke, every brag, every confession. Liam's breathing quickened. Alvarez could see his chest rising and falling. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to be charged with first-degree murder. And the DA is going to file a motion to try you as an adult. Liam's head snapped up. I'm 17. They can't do that. Alvarez smiled coldly. Yes, they can. And they will. You're not going to juvie, Liam. You're going to prison. Real prison, with real criminals, for the rest of your life. Liam's jaw trembled. I didn't do anything. His voice cracked. Alvarez opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. It was the selfie. Liam's smiling face. Khloe's body barely visible in the background. Then explain this. Liam stared at the photo. His hand started to shake. That's not... I didn't... Alvarez cut him off. Stop. Just stop. We know you did it. The evidence is overwhelming. The only question now is whether you're going to take responsibility or keep lying. Liam looked up at her. His eyes were wet. But there was still something cold behind them, something calculating. I want my lawyer. Alvarez leaned back. Fine. Interview's over. She stood, gathered the folder, and walked to the door. Marcus opened it for her. Just before stepping out, Alvarez turned back. One more thing, Liam. That message you sent to your friend, the one where you said they can't do anything to you because you're 17? She smiled. You were wrong. The door closed behind them. Liam sat alone in the room, staring at the table, his reflection distorted in the metal surface. And for the first time, the weight of what he'd done started to sink in. The arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday. In the days leading up to it, the case exploded in the media. Local news picked it up first, then state outlets, then national. Teen arrested in brutal killing of honor student. Snapchat messages reveal chilling confession. 17-year-old faces life in prison. Khloe's face was everywhere, her school photo, smiling, bright, full of life, and next to it, Liam's mugshot, blank expression, dead eyes. The contrast was jarring. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Social media erupted. People demanded justice. They called Liam a monster. They shared Khloe's story. They posted tributes. Candlelight vigils were held outside Riverside High. Hundreds of people showed up. Teachers, students, parents, strangers. They held signs. They cried. They hugged. Khloe's parents, Diana and Robert, gave a brief statement to the press. Diana's voice shook as she spoke. Our daughter was kind. She was loving. She had her whole life ahead of her. And it was taken from her by someone who felt nothing. Robert stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his face carved from stone. We want justice, not just for Khloe, but for every family who's had to bury their child because of senseless violence. The statement was played on every news channel. It was shared millions of times online. The pressure on the DA's office was immense, but they didn't need pressure. They had the evidence, and they were ready to move. On Monday morning, the courthouse was packed. Media vans lined the street. Reporters jostled for position. Inside, the courtroom was standing room only. Khloe's family sat in the front row on the left. Diana clutched a photo of Khloe to her chest. Robert stared straight ahead, his jaw set. On the right side, near the back, sat Rebecca Turner, alone. Her husband had left her 2 days after Liam's arrest. He couldn't handle it, couldn't reconcile the boy he raised with the monster the evidence revealed. Rebecca looked small, broken. She kept her eyes down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Brennan entered and took his seat. "Be seated," he said. The room settled into tense silence. The side door opened. Liam was led in by 2 guards. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit now. His hands were cuffed in front of him. His hair was messy. He looked younger somehow, more like a scared kid than a killer. But the moment he sat down at the defense table, he glanced over at the gallery. His eyes scanned the crowd. And when they landed on the cameras, something shifted. The fear faded. The mask came back. He sat up straighter. He lifted his chin. And then, just slightly, he smirked. Diana saw it. She gasped audibly. Robert's hand clenched into a fist. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Alvarez, sitting in the back, shook her head in disbelief. This kid still thought he could win. Judge Brennan banged his gavel. "Order?" The room went silent. The judge looked down at the paperwork in front of him. "We're here for the arraignment of Liam Michael Turner. Mr. Turner, you are charged with murder in the 1st degree. How do you plead?" Liam's public defender, a tired-looking man named Richard Carlson, stood up. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The judge made a note. "The defendant is remanded without bail. Trial date will be set within 60 days. Carlson cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client is a minor. We request he remain in juvenile detention pending trial." The judge didn't even look up. "Request denied. Given the severity of the crime and the evidence presented, the defendant will remain in county jail." Carlson tried again. "Your Honor, the prosecution has filed a motion to try my client as an adult. We believe that's inappropriate given his age and lack of prior criminal history." Judge Brennan finally looked up. His expression was cold. "Mr. Carlson, your client is accused of luring a 16-year-old girl into the woods and murdering her. Then he took a photo with her body and bragged about it to his friends. Age is not a shield for that kind of depravity. The motion to try him as an adult is granted." The courtroom erupted. Some people clapped, others gasped. Khloe's mother sobbed into her husband's shoulder. Rebecca Turner covered her face with her hands. And Liam? He sat perfectly still, but the smirk was gone now. His face had gone pale. Judge Brennan banged his gavel again. "Order! One more outburst and I'll clear this courtroom." The noise died down. The judge looked at Liam. "Mr. Turner, do you understand what just happened?" Liam nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." The judge leaned forward. "You're going to be tried as an adult. That means if you're convicted, you'll face the same penalties as any adult offender. Do you understand?" Liam's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." Judge Brennan sat back. "Good. Bailiff, remove the defendant." The guard stood Liam up and led him toward the side door. As he passed the gallery, he glanced once more at his mother. She was crying. He looked away. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed the DA's office. District Attorney Monica Reyes stood at a podium, flanked by Alvarez and Marcus. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded forward. Reyes was a sharp woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a reputation for being relentless. She cleared her throat and began. Today, Liam Turner was arraigned on charges of first-degree murder. He has pleaded not guilty. He will be tried as an adult. The evidence in this case is overwhelming. We have forensic evidence, digital evidence, eyewitness testimony. And we have his own words, preserved in messages he thought would disappear. She paused, letting that sink in. Liam Turner believed he was above the law. He believed his age would protect him. He was wrong. A reporter shouted a question. "What kind of sentence are you seeking?" Reyes didn't hesitate. "Life without the possibility of parole." Another reporter. "What message does this case send?" Reyes looked directly into the camera. "It sends the message that justice doesn't care how old you are. It cares about the truth. And the truth is that Liam Turner is a murderer, and he will be held accountable." The press conference ended. Alvarez and Marcus walked back to their car. Marcus let out a long breath. "That was intense." Alvarez nodded. "It's about to get worse. The trial's going to be a circus." Marcus looked over at her. "You think we'll win?" Alvarez's eyes were hard. "We better." Back in his cell, Liam lay on the narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling. He could hear other inmates shouting down the hall, the clang of metal doors, the hum of fluorescent lights. This wasn't juvie. This was real. The reality of it was starting to crush him. He thought about Khloe, not with guilt, not with remorse, but with frustration. She'd ruined everything. If she'd just stayed on the main path, if she'd just ignored his message, none of this would have happened. It was her fault, really. That's what he told himself. Because admitting the truth, that he was a killer, that he'd destroyed a life for no reason other than curiosity and cruelty, was too much. So he built walls in his mind, walls made of denial and blame, and he told himself he'd find a way out. But deep down, in a place he refused to acknowledge, he knew. The messages were real. The photo was real. The evidence was real. And no amount of lying or smirking or playing the victim was going to change that. The trial was coming. And Liam Turner, for all his arrogance, was about to face the one thing he thought he'd never have to face: consequences. Tanya Brooks had been working in cybercrimes for 8 years. She'd seen a lot: hackers, predators, fraudsters. But this case was different. This wasn't about stolen credit cards or phishing schemes. This was about a kid who thought he could outsmart technology. And Tanya took that personally. She sat in her dimly lit office, surrounded by monitors, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She'd already pulled Liam's Snapchat data, but she wasn't done, not even close. She wanted everything, every digital footprint he'd ever left, every search, every click, every trace. Because people like Liam always left traces. They couldn't help it. She started with his Google account. The search history was damning. 2 weeks before Khloe's murder, Liam had searched. How long do Snapchat messages last? 3 days later. Can police recover deleted Snapchat messages? Then, the day before the murder, how to get someone to meet you alone. Tanya screenshot every search and added it to the evidence file. But there was more. She dug into his YouTube history. He'd been watching true crime videos, lots of them. Videos about unsolved murders, about criminals who got away, about forensic mistakes. He was studying, learning, planning. Tanya felt her stomach turn. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated. Next, she accessed his iCloud photo library. Most of it was typical teenage stuff: memes, screenshots of video games, selfies. But then she found a folder labeled Private. It was locked. But Tanya had the warrant and the tools. She bypassed the encryption in under 5 minutes. Inside were photos that made her blood run cold. Pictures of Khloe, taken from a distance, walking to school, sitting at lunch, talking with friends. He'd been watching her, stalking her. Some of the photos were time-stamped weeks before the murder. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned, calculated. Tanya saved every image and tagged them for evidence. Then she found something else, a voice memo. She hesitated before playing it. Something about the file name, Practice, made her uneasy. She clicked play. Liam's voice came through the speakers, quiet at first, then clearer. "Hey, Khloe, it's Liam. I need your help with something. Can you meet me?" A pause, then his voice again, slightly different, more urgent. "It's about the essay, remember? You said you'd help." Another pause. He was rehearsing, practicing the exact words he'd used to lure her. Tanya stopped the recording and sat back in her chair. She felt sick. This wasn't just premeditation. This was cold, calculated, sociopathic behavior. She picked up her phone and called Alvarez. "You need to hear this." An hour later, Alvarez and Marcus were in Tanya's office, listening to the voice memo. When it finished, the room was silent. Alvarez's jaw was tight. Marcus looked like he wanted to put his fist through the wall. "He practiced?" Marcus said, his voice low. "He literally practiced how to trick her." Alvarez nodded slowly. "This seals it. This proves intent. This proves premeditation." Tanya pulled up another file. "There's more. I found a document on his laptop. It's titled Plan." She opened it. The document was short, just a few lines, but every word was damning. "Get her alone. Woods. No witnesses. Make it quick. Dump phone. Burn clothes." Alvarez read it twice, then she looked at Tanya. "When was this created?" Tanya checked the metadata. 5 days before Khloe was killed. Alvarez felt a cold rage settle in her chest. This wasn't a troubled kid who made a mistake. This was a predator, a calculating, remorseless predator who planned every detail. "Send all of this to the DA," Alvarez said, "and make copies. I want backups of backups." Tanya nodded. "Already done." Marcus leaned against the desk. "This kid's going down. There's no way he walks." Alvarez agreed, but she also knew that the defense would fight. They'd argue the evidence was circumstantial. They'd claim Liam was just a confused teenager. They'd try to paint him as a victim of overzealous police work. It was their job, but Alvarez's job was to make sure the jury saw the truth. And the truth was sitting right here in Tanya's files. Over the next 2 weeks, the prosecution built their case. They interviewed witnesses. They organized evidence. They prepared timelines and forensic reports. Khloe's autopsy results came back. The cause of death was confirmed as blunt force trauma combined with asphyxiation. The injuries were severe, brutal, the kind that spoke to rage and intent. Dr. Granger, the medical examiner, would testify that Khloe had fought for her life. Her defensive wounds told the story of a girl who refused to give up, who clawed and kicked and screamed. But in the end, she was overpowered. The thought of her final moments haunted everyone involved in the case. And the prosecution also tracked down Liam's friends, the ones he'd messaged after the murder. Jason and Tyler were both 17, both terrified, both cooperative. Jason admitted that Liam had sent him the selfie. He'd thought it was a joke at first, some kind of dark prank. But when the news broke about Khloe's death, Jason realized it was real. He'd deleted the message immediately. But it was too late. The cloud had already backed it up. Jason agreed to testify. Tyler did too. He told investigators that Liam had always been off, that he'd joked about wanting to know what it felt like to kill someone. Tyler had laughed it off at the time. Now he couldn't sleep at night. The defense, meanwhile, was scrambling. Richard Carlson knew he was facing an uphill battle. The evidence was overwhelming. But his job wasn't to prove innocence. It was to create reasonable doubt. He hired a forensic psychologist to evaluate Liam. The psychologist, Dr. Ellen Marsh, spent 3 hours interviewing him. Her report was troubling. She noted that Liam displayed significant narcissistic traits and a lack of empathy consistent with antisocial personality disorder. But she also noted that he was 17, that his brain was still developing, that adolescents were prone to impulsive behavior. Carlson planned to use that. He'd argue that Liam wasn't a monster. He was a kid who made a terrible mistake, a kid who deserved a second chance. But there was a problem. The evidence didn't support impulsivity. The searches, the photos, the voice memo, the written plan. It all pointed to premeditation. Carlson knew that, so he shifted strategy. He'd attack the digital evidence. He'd argue that the messages could have been fabricated, that the cloud data wasn't reliable, that the prosecution was overreaching. It was a weak strategy. But it was all he had. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out, both sides prepared. The media coverage intensified. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse daily. Some held signs demanding justice for Khloe. Others, surprisingly, held signs defending Liam. "He's just a kid," they said. "Don't ruin his life." The divide was sharp and emotional. Inside the jail, Liam's demeanor began to change. The initial shock had worn off. The fear had faded, and in its place, arrogance returned. He started giving interviews to journalists who'd write him letters. He claimed he was innocent, that the police had planted evidence, even that he was being railroaded because the town needed someone to blame. Some media outlets ran with it. They published sympathetic profiles. They questioned the prosecution's motives. It infuriated Alvarez. But it also steeled her resolve. She wasn't going to let this kid manipulate his way out of justice. She worked longer hours, double-checked every piece of evidence, made sure every witness was prepped. She wasn't leaving anything to chance. 2 weeks before trial, the prosecution received an unexpected gift. A student from Riverside High came forward. Her name was Emma. She'd been Khloe's best friend, and she had something to say. Emma told Alvarez that Liam had approached her a month before Khloe's death. He'd asked her questions about Khloe, where she walked to school, what time she left, if she ever went through the nature reserve. Emma thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it at the time. Now it made sense. Liam had been gathering information, planning. Emma agreed to testify. Her testimony would establish that Liam had been fixated on Khloe long before the murder. It was another piece of the puzzle, and it fit perfectly. The defense tried to block Emma's testimony. They argued it was hearsay, that it was prejudicial. But Judge Brennan allowed it. The trial was shaping up to be a battle, and everyone knew it. The courtroom would become a stage. The jury would become the audience. And the truth, no matter how ugly, would be laid bare for all to see. The morning of the trial, the courthouse looked like a fortress. Barricades lined the streets. Security checkpoints were set up at every entrance. News vans from across the country crowded the parking lot. Satellite dishes pointed toward the sky. Reporters practiced their opening lines. Photographers jostled for the best angles. Inside, the tension was suffocating. The courtroom filled an hour before proceedings were set to begin. Khloe's family sat in the front row, surrounded by friends and supporters. Diana wore a locket with Khloe's photo inside. Robert held her hand tightly. Behind them sat teachers from Riverside High, classmates, community members, people who'd never met Khloe but felt her loss deeply. On the other side of the aisle, Rebecca Turner sat alone. She'd aged 10 years in 2 months. Her eyes were hollow. Her hands trembled in her lap. No one sat near her. She was a ghost in her own life. The bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Brennan entered and took his seat. The room settled into expectant silence. "Be seated," the judge said. His voice was firm, authoritative. He looked out over the packed courtroom. "This is a court of law. I will not tolerate outbursts. I will not tolerate disruptions. Anyone who cannot control themselves will be removed. Am I clear?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The judge nodded. "Bring in the defendant." The side door opened. 2 guards led Liam in. He was wearing a button-down shirt and khakis. His lawyer's idea: make him look young, innocent, sympathetic, but the clothes couldn't hide what was beneath. Liam walked to the defense table and sat down. He glanced at the jury box, still empty, then at the gallery. His eyes found his mother. She tried to smile. He looked away. The judge addressed the attorneys. "Counselors, are you ready to proceed?" District Attorney Monica Reyes stood. "The prosecution is ready, Your Honor." Richard Carlson stood. "The defense is ready, Your Honor." Judge Brennan nodded. "Let's bring in the jury." The jury had been selected over 3 days, 12 people, 7 women, 5 men, ages ranging from 24 to 68. They'd all been vetted, questioned, examined for bias. Now they filed into the box and took their seats. They looked serious, somber. They knew the weight of what they were about to do. Judge Brennan addressed them. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are about to hear opening statements. I remind you that statements are not evidence. They are simply the attorney's roadmap of what they intend to prove. Keep an open mind, listen carefully, and remember, the burden of proof lies entirely with the prosecution." The jury nodded. The judge looked at Reyes. "Proceed." Monica Reyes stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. She was poised, confident. She'd tried over 100 cases in her career. She knew how to command a room. She looked at the jury. Khloe Martin was 16 years old. She was an honor student, a volleyball captain, a daughter, a friend. She had dreams. She had plans. She had a future. Reyes paused, letting that sink in. On the morning of September 14th, she left her house to walk to school. She never made it, because someone lured her into the woods. Someone who had been planning it for weeks. Someone who watched her, followed her, studied her, and when he finally got her alone, he killed her. Reyes turned and pointed at Liam. "That someone is Liam Turner." Liam stared straight ahead, his face blank. Reyes continued. "The evidence in this case is overwhelming. We have forensic evidence. Liam's shoes match the prints found at the crime scene. We have his clothes, hidden in his bedroom, covered in Khloe's blood. We have digital evidence. Messages he sent to Khloe, luring her to the woods. Messages he sent to his friends afterward, bragging about what he did. We have a selfie he took with Khloe's body in the background." The jury leaned forward. Reyes let the weight of her words hang in the air. "And we have his own written plan, a document titled Plan, created 5 days before the murder, detailing exactly how he would do it." Reyes walked slowly in front of the jury box. "Liam Turner thought he was smart. He thought he could get away with it. He thought his age would protect him. He told his friends, and I quote, 'I'm 17. They can't do anything to me anyway.' But he was wrong." She stopped and looked each juror in the eye. "This case is not about age. It's about accountability. It's about a young girl who was murdered in cold blood by someone who felt nothing, and it's about making sure that justice is served." Reyes returned to her seat. The courtroom was silent. The jury looked shaken. Judge Brennan turned to the defense. "Mr. Carlson." Richard Carlson stood slowly. He looked tired already. He walked to the center of the room and faced the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client is 17 years old. 17. Still a minor. Still a child in the eyes of the law, in most circumstances. And yes, he is accused of a horrible crime. But accused does not mean guilty." Carlson paused. "The prosecution wants you to believe that Liam is a monster, that he planned this, that he's a cold-blooded killer. But the truth is far more complicated." He gestured toward Liam. "This is a boy who made terrible decisions, a boy who got caught up in something he didn't fully understand, a boy whose brain is still developing." Carlson walked closer to the jury. "The prosecution will show you evidence, and yes, some of it is troubling. But I ask you to consider the source. Digital evidence can be manipulated. Messages can be taken out of context, and teenagers, especially teenage boys, say stupid things, reckless things, things they don't mean." He shook his head. "The prosecution wants to paint Liam as a calculated predator. But what if he's just a scared kid who made a mistake? What if this was a tragic accident that spiraled out of control?" Several jurors frowned. Carlson could feel he was losing them. He pressed on. All I ask is that you keep an open mind, listen to all the evidence, and remember that the burden of proof is on the prosecution. They have to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Liam is guilty, and I don't believe they can. Carlson sat down. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Brennan looked at Reyes. Call your first witness. Reyes stood. The prosecution calls Detective Karen Alvarez. Alvarez walked to the witness stand. She was sworn in and took her seat. Reyes approached. Detective Alvarez, can you describe your involvement in this case? Alvarez nodded. I was the lead investigator. I was called to the scene on the morning of September 15th when Khloe Martin's body was discovered. Reyes pulled up a photo on the courtroom monitor. It showed the crime scene. The yellow tape. The trees. Khloe's body, partially obscured. Several jurors looked away. What did you observe at the scene? Alvarez's voice was steady. It was clear there had been a violent struggle. Khloe had defensive wounds. There were signs she fought back. We recovered forensic evidence, including shoe prints, blood samples, and tissue under her fingernails. Reyes nodded. And what led you to Liam Turner? Alvarez explained the phone records, the Snapchat messages, the IP trace, the neighbor's doorbell camera, the search warrant, the bloody clothes. With each detail, the case against Liam grew stronger. The jury took notes. Some shook their heads. Carlson objected several times, but most were overruled. Alvarez was a seasoned witness. She didn't crack. When Reyes finished, Carlson stood for cross-examination. Detective Alvarez, you said you found bloody clothes in my client's closet, correct? Alvarez nodded. That's correct. Carlson stepped closer. And were there any witnesses who saw my client place those clothes there? Alvarez met his eyes. No, but they were hidden under a loose floorboard. That suggests intent to conceal. Carlson waved his hand. Or it suggests someone else put them there. You have no direct evidence linking my client to those clothes, do you? Alvarez remained calm. We have DNA evidence. The blood on the clothes matches Khloe Martin, and fibers from the clothes match fibers found at the crime scene. Carlson frowned. But you can't definitively say my client wore those clothes, can you? Alvarez tilted her head. The clothes were in his closet, in his room, hidden by him. Yes, I can say he wore them. Carlson knew he wasn't winning. He switched tactics. You mentioned Snapchat messages, but Snapchat messages delete automatically, don't they? Alvarez nodded. They do, but our cybercrimes unit recovered them from the cloud. Carlson raised an eyebrow. The cloud, a digital storage system that, theoretically, could be hacked or manipulated, correct? Alvarez sighed. Theoretically, anything can be hacked, but there's no evidence that happened here. The messages were authenticated. They came from Liam's account, from his IP address, at the times in question. Carlson tried a few more angles, but got nowhere. Alvarez was unshakable. He finally sat down. Judge Brennan looked at the clock. We'll recess for lunch. Court will resume at 1:30. During the break, the prosecution team huddled in a conference room. Reyes looked pleased. Alvarez did great. The jury's with us. Marcus nodded. Carlson's flailing. He's got nothing. Alvarez was less optimistic. He's going to go after the digital evidence hard. We need Tanya to be airtight. Reyes agreed. She's up next. She'll handle it. They spent the next hour prepping. Meanwhile, in a holding room, Liam sat with his lawyer. Carlson looked frustrated. You need to show some emotion. The jury thinks you don't care. Liam shrugged. I'm not going to cry if that's what you want. Carlson rubbed his temples. I'm trying to save your life, Liam. Work with me. Liam leaned back. Whatever. At 1:30, court resumed. Reyes called Tanya Brooks to the stand. Tanya was sworn in and sat down. She was nervous, but prepared. Reyes smiled at her. "Ms. Brooks, can you explain your role in this investigation?" Tanya nodded. "I'm a digital forensic analyst. I was tasked with recovering and analyzing digital evidence from Liam Turner's devices and accounts." Reyes gestured to the monitor. "And what did you find?" Tanya pulled up a slide. It showed the Snapchat messages, the ones Liam sent to Khloe, the ones luring her to the woods. Tanya walked the jury through each message, the timestamps, the IP addresses, the authentication process. She explained how deleted data is stored, how cloud backups work, how the messages were recovered. Then she showed the messages Liam sent after the murder, the bragging, the jokes, the photo. The courtroom gasped when the selfie appeared on the screen. Diana sobbed. Robert held her. Judge Brennan banged his gavel. "Order," Tanya continued. When she showed the Google searches, the YouTube history, the voice memo, the written plan. Each piece of evidence was another nail in Liam's coffin. By the time Tanya finished, the jury looked disgusted. Carlson stood for cross-examination. He tried to poke holes. He questioned the reliability of cloud data. He suggested the messages could have been faked, but Tanya had answers for everything. She'd done her homework. Carlson sat down, defeated. The prosecution rested their case after 2 more witnesses. Emma, Khloe's best friend, testified about Liam's strange questions. Jason testified about the selfie. Both were emotional. Both were credible. The defense called their witnesses next. Dr. Marsh, the psychologist, testified about Liam's age and brain development. She argued that teenagers lack impulse control, or that they don't fully understand consequences. But on cross-examination, Reyes destroyed her. "Dr. Marsh, does brain development explain premeditation? Does it explain writing a plan, practicing a script, taking a trophy photo?" Dr. Marsh hesitated. "No, but—" Reyes cut her off. "No further questions." The defense rested. Closing arguments were scheduled for the next day. That night, both sides prepared. Reyes rehearsed her closing in front of a mirror. Alvarez reviewed her notes. Marcus tried to sleep but couldn't. On the defense side, Carlson knew he was losing. He wrote and rewrote his closing, searching for an angle. Any angle. Liam, back in his cell, stared at the ceiling. For the first time, doubt crept in. Real doubt. Maybe he wasn't getting out of this. Maybe the smirk wasn't enough. Maybe the law didn't care that he was 17. The thought terrified him, but he pushed it down. He'd find a way. He always did, or so he told himself. The courtroom was packed again, every seat filled, standing room only, in the back. The air was thick with anticipation. This was it, the final act. Judge Brennan took his seat and addressed the room. "We will now hear closing arguments. Ms. Reyes, you may proceed." Monica Reyes stood. She walked to the center of the courtroom and faced the jury. She didn't hold notes. She didn't need them. She'd lived this case for months. "Ladies and gentlemen, over the past week you've heard testimony, you've seen evidence, and I believe the conclusion is inescapable. Liam Turner murdered Khloe Martin, and he did it with premeditation, with malice, and without a shred of remorse." Reyes walked slowly in front of the jury box. "Let's review the evidence. Liam searched online for how to lure someone alone. He practiced a script to trick Khloe. He wrote a plan detailing how he'd commit the murder. He sent Khloe messages, using the guise of needing help, to get her into the woods. He killed her, and then, instead of calling for help, instead of showing any human decency, he took a selfie. He smiled, and he sent it to his friends with a joke. Her voice hardened. This was not an accident. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated execution carried out by someone who thought he was above the law. Reyes stopped and looked directly at Liam. He told his friends, "I'm 17. They can't do anything to me." He believed his age was a shield. That he could murder a 16-year-old girl and walk away. But Khloe Martin doesn't get to walk away. She doesn't get to graduate. She doesn't get to go to college. She doesn't get to fall in love, start a career, have a family. All of that was taken from her. By him. Reyes turned back to the jury. Your job is not to feel sorry for Liam Turner. Your job is to deliver justice for Khloe Martin. And justice, in this case, demands a guilty verdict. Thank you. She sat down. The room was silent. Judge Brennan looked at Carlson. Mr. Carlson. Carlson stood. He looked exhausted. He walked to the center of the room and faced the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that what happened to Khloe Martin wasn't a tragedy. It was. A young girl lost her life. And that is heartbreaking. But tragedy does not equal murder. He paused. The prosecution wants you to believe that Liam is some kind of calculating monster. But what you've seen is a 17-year-old boy, a child. Yes, he made terrible decisions. Yes, he said awful things. But teenagers say awful things. They act without thinking. Their brains are not fully developed. That's not an excuse. It's a fact. Carlson gestured toward Liam. Look at him. Does he look like a hardened criminal? Or does he look like a scared kid who got in over his head? Several jurors glanced at Liam. He sat perfectly still, staring at the table. Carlson continued. The prosecution's case relies heavily on digital evidence, messages, searches, but context matters. Teenagers search for all kinds of things online. Dark things, disturbing things. It doesn't mean they act on them. He shook his head. And the so-called plan they found on his computer? It's a document with a few vague lines. It could be a story idea, a joke. We don't know, because the prosecution didn't prove it. Carlson's voice softened. I'm not asking you to let Liam off the hook. I'm asking you to consider reasonable doubt. Can you say, beyond all doubt, that every piece of evidence points to premeditated murder? Or is there a possibility, even a small one, that this was a tragic accident? That Liam panicked? That he made mistakes trying to cover it up? He looked each juror in the eye. If there's doubt, you must acquit. That's the law. Thank you. He sat down. The room remained quiet. Reyes stood for rebuttal. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense wants you to believe there's doubt. But let's be clear. There is no doubt. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendant's own words condemn him. He planned it. He executed it. He bragged about it. That's not doubt. That's certainty. Find him guilty. She sat down. Judge Brennan addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the evidence. You've heard the arguments. Now it's your turn. You will deliberate and reach a verdict. Remember, the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Your verdict must be unanimous. He gave them final instructions on the law. Then the jury was led out. The waiting began. Khloe's family sat together, holding hands, praying silently. Rebecca Turner sat alone, staring at nothing. Liam was taken back to holding. The courtroom slowly emptied. Hours passed. The jury deliberated through the afternoon, then into the evening. At 7 p.m., they sent a note. They wanted to review the Snapchat messages and the selfie. The evidence was brought to them. They deliberated for another hour. Then another note. They were ready. The call came at 8:47 p.m. The jury had reached a verdict. The courthouse, which had been slowly emptying, suddenly roared back to life. Reporters scrambled to their positions. Cameras were repositioned. The gallery filled within minutes. Khloe's family rushed back in, their faces pale with exhaustion and hope. Diana's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Robert held her close, whispering prayers under his breath. On the other side, Rebecca Turner returned alone. She looked smaller than before, like the weight of the world had physically compressed her. She sat in the same spot she'd occupied all week, her eyes red and swollen. She didn't look at anyone. She just stared at the empty defense table, waiting. Liam was brought back in. The guards led him through the side door, and he walked slowly to his seat. For the first time since the trial began, he looked genuinely afraid. His hands were trembling slightly as he sat down. His lawyer, Carlson, leaned over and whispered something to him. Liam nodded but didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the jury box. Empty for now, but not for long. Judge Brennan entered, and the bailiff called for everyone to rise. The room stood as one. The judge took his seat and surveyed the packed courtroom. "Be seated," he said. The sound of 300 people sitting in unison echoed through the space. "Bring in the jury." The side door opened. The 12 jurors filed in slowly. Single file. Their faces were serious, drawn, and some looked like they'd been crying. As they took their seats, every person in that courtroom tried to read them, tried to decode their expressions. There's an old courtroom superstition that if the jury doesn't look at the defendant, it means they've voted to convict. Liam knew this. He stared at each juror as they entered, searching for eye contact. Not one of them looked at him. Not one. Liam's breathing quickened. His lawyer noticed and put a hand on his arm. "Stay calm," Carlson whispered. But Liam's face had gone pale. He knew. Deep down, he knew. Judge Brennan addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Donovan, stood. "We have, Your Honor." The bailiff walked over and took the folded paper from her hands. He carried it to the judge. Brennan unfolded it and read silently. His expression didn't change. He'd done this 1,000 times. He folded the paper again and handed it back to the bailiff. "The defendant will rise." Liam stood on shaking legs. Carlson stood beside him. The courtroom held its collective breath. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one coughed. No one breathed. Patricia Donovan looked down at the paper in her hands. Then she looked up, past Liam, into the gallery. "In the matter of the state versus Liam Michael Turner, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we, the jury, find the defendant." She paused. The pause felt like an eternity. "Guilty." The word hung in the air for a split second. Then the courtroom erupted. Khloe's mother let out a sob so raw, so full of pain and relief, that it cut through every other sound. Robert wrapped his arms around her as she collapsed into him. Friends and family embraced. Some were crying. Others were shouting, "Yes," and "Thank God." Judge Brennan's gavel came down hard. "Order! Order in this court!" But the emotions were too strong. It took a full minute for the room to settle. Liam stood frozen. His mouth was open slightly. His eyes were wide. He looked like he'd been physically struck. He turned to his lawyer, searching for an explanation, for a way out, for something. Carlson just shook his head. There was nothing to say. Liam's legs gave out, and he sat down hard. His hands came up to cover his face. For the first time, he looked like what he was, a 17-year-old boy who'd just been told he was going to prison for life. Behind him, his mother let out a wail. She doubled over in her seat, her body shaking with sobs. No one comforted her. No one came to her side. She was alone in her grief. Judge Brennan waited until the room was quiet again. "The jury is polled. Does each of you agree with this verdict?" One by one, each juror answered. "Yes, Your Honor." 12 voices, 12 confirmations, 12 nails in Liam's coffin. When the last juror had spoken, Brennan nodded. "The verdict is accepted and recorded. The jury is dismissed with the court's thanks for your service." The jurors stood and filed out. Several of them were wiping their eyes. This hadn't been easy for them. They'd held a young man's life in their hands, and they'd voted to take it away. But they'd also seen the evidence. They'd heard the testimony. And they'd made the only choice they could. Judge Brennan turned to Liam. "Mr. Turner, you have been found guilty of murder in the first degree. Sentencing will be held 2 weeks from today. Until then, you will remain in custody without bail. Bailiff, remove the defendant." The guards moved forward. Liam stood slowly, as if in a trance. They put his hands behind his back and cuffed him. As they led him toward the side door, he looked back one last time. His eyes found his mother. She was still sobbing, her face buried in her hands. "Mom?" he called out, his voice cracking. She looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment everything else fell away. Just a mother and her son. She mouthed the words, "I love you." Liam's face crumpled. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. The courtroom slowly emptied. Outside on the courthouse steps, Monica Reyes held a press conference. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded forward. She stood at the podium, flanked by Alvarez and Marcus. "Today, justice was served," she began. Liam Turner was found guilty of the brutal murder of Khloe Martin. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury saw through his lies and his arrogance, and they delivered the verdict that Khloe's family deserved. A reporter shouted a question. "What sentence will you be seeking?" Reyes didn't hesitate. Life without the possibility of parole. Liam Turner took a life. He should spend the rest of his behind bars. Another reporter. "What do you say to those who argue he's too young for such a harsh sentence?" Reyes's expression hardened. Age is not an excuse for murder. Khloe Martin was only 16. She'll never see 17, 18, or any age beyond. Liam Turner robbed her of her entire future. Like he doesn't get to use his youth as a shield. She paused, letting her words sink in. This verdict sends a clear message. If you commit an adult crime, you face adult consequences. Period. The press conference continued for another 10 minutes. Then Reyes, Alvarez, and Marcus walked back inside. In a quiet conference room, they allowed themselves a moment. Alvarez leaned against the wall and exhaled deeply. "We did it," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. Khloe got her justice. Reyes sat down, suddenly feeling the weight of the last 3 months. Now we make sure the sentence sticks. Back in his cell, Liam sat on his bunk, staring at the concrete wall. The reality was crushing him. Guilty. The word echoed in his mind over and over. Guilty. He'd been so sure he'd win, so sure his age would save him. He's so sure the jury would see reasonable doubt. But they hadn't. They'd seen him for exactly what he was. A killer, a liar, a monster. He thought about the sentencing hearing in 2 weeks. His lawyer had already told him what to expect. Life without parole. No chance of freedom. Ever. He'd spend the rest of his life in a cage, growing old, growing bitter, forgotten by everyone except the family of the girl he'd killed. The thought made him want to scream. But he didn't. He just sat there, numb as the walls closed in around him. 2 weeks later, the sentencing hearing arrived. The courtroom was full again, though not as packed as during the verdict. Khloe's family sat in their usual spot. Diana had prepared a victim impact statement. She'd rewritten it a dozen times, trying to find the right words to express the enormity of her loss. Now, as she sat waiting for her name to be called, she clutched the paper in her hands, her knuckles white. Robert sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. He would speak too. They both needed to. They needed Liam to hear what he'd done, to understand the devastation he'd caused, even if he didn't care, even if he felt nothing. They needed to say it. Judge Brennan entered, and court was called to order. Liam was brought in. He looked thinner, paler. The 2 weeks in county jail had taken a visible toll. He sat at the defense table and kept his eyes down. He didn't look at the gallery, didn't look at Khloe's family. He just stared at the table in front of him. Judge Brennan reviewed the proceedings. "We are here for sentencing in the matter of the state versus Liam Michael Turner. The defendant has been found guilty of murder in the first degree. Before I impose sentence, the court will hear victim impact statements. Mrs. Martin, you may proceed." Diana stood slowly. Her legs felt weak. Robert helped steady her. She walked to the podium at the center of the courtroom. She unfolded her statement with shaking hands. Then she looked up, not at the judge, not at the jury box, at Liam. She stared directly at him. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She just looked at the boy who'd taken her daughter from her. Liam felt her gaze and finally looked up. Their eyes met, and Diana began to speak. Her voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger with each word. My daughter's name was Khloe. Khloe Rose Martin. She was 16 years old. She loved music. She loved volleyball. She loved helping people. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to save lives. Diana's voice cracked. She paused, collecting herself. On the morning of September 14th, she left our house like she did every day. She was humming a song. She kissed me goodbye. She promised to text me when she got to school. Tears streamed down Diana's face. She never texted. She never came home because she pointed at Liam. You took her. You tricked her. You lured her into the woods, and you killed her. Her voice rose. She fought you. She fought for her life, but you were stronger, and you didn't stop. You didn't show her mercy. You didn't call for help. You took a picture. You smiled. You bragged to your friends. Diana's hands gripped the podium. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand the pain you've caused? I wake up every morning, and for one split second, I forget. I forget she's gone. And then I remember, and it feels like dying all over again. Her voice broke into sobs. You took my baby. You took my whole world. And for what? For fun? For curiosity? Because you wanted to know what it felt like? She shook her head, unable to continue. Robert stood and came to her side. He put his arm around her and helped her back to her seat. Then he took the podium. Robert's statement was shorter, but no less devastating. Liam, I don't know if you're capable of feeling remorse. I don't know if you understand what you've done, but I hope you do. I hope every single day for the rest of your life you think about Khloe. I hope her face haunts you. I hope you never know peace. His voice was steady, cold. You thought you'd get away with it. And you thought being 17 meant you were untouchable. You were wrong, and now you'll spend the rest of your life paying for what you did, and that still won't be enough. He stepped down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Brennan looked at Liam. Mr. Turner, do you wish to make a statement before sentencing? Carlson leaned over and whispered to Liam. Liam hesitated. Then he stood. His voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. That was it. 2 words. Flat, emotionless. Diana let out a bitter laugh. Judge Brennan's expression didn't change. You may be seated. Liam sat down. The judge opened a folder and reviewed the sentencing guidelines. Then he looked up. Liam Turner, you have been convicted of murder in the 1st degree. The evidence showed premeditation, planning, a complete disregard for human life. You lured a young girl to her death. You killed her, and you celebrated it. Brennan's voice was firm. This court has considered your age. It has considered your lack of prior record, but it has also considered the severity of your crime and the absolute absence of remorse. Judge Brennan leaned forward. You told your friends that being 17 meant they couldn't do anything to you. You were wrong. Age does not grant immunity from justice. It is the sentence of this court that you be remanded to the custody of the State Department of Corrections for a term of life without the possibility of parole. The gavel came down. Final, absolute. Liam's head dropped. Rebecca Turner cried out from the back of the room. But no one looked at her. All eyes were on Liam. The guard stood him up and began to lead him away. As he passed the gallery, he glanced one last time at Khloe's family. Diana met his eyes, and she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, I hope it was worth it. Liam looked away, and then he was gone. The prison transport van pulled away from the courthouse at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon. Liam sat in the back, handcuffed and shackled, staring out the small reinforced window. The streets of Riverside passed by. The town he'd grown up in, the neighborhood where he'd ridden his bike as a kid, the park where he'd played basketball, all of it slipping away, forever. The reality of the word life was beginning to sink in. Not life as in living, life as in a sentence, life as in until you die, no parole, no second chances, no getting out. The van turned onto the highway, and the town disappeared behind him. Liam closed his eyes. But all he could see was the judge's face, the gavel coming down, the finality of it all. The drive took 2 hours. The van eventually pulled up to the imposing gates of Coldwater State Penitentiary. It was a maximum security facility. Concrete walls 30 feet high, guard towers at every corner, razor wire gleaming in the afternoon sun. This was home now. The gates opened with a mechanical groan, and the van drove through. Liam felt his stomach drop. He'd seen prisons on TV, in movies, but being inside one was different. The air felt heavier, colder. The van stopped at a processing building, and Liam was let out. Guards in gray uniforms surrounded him. No one spoke to him. No one acknowledged him. He was just another number now, just another inmate in a system designed to forget him. Processing took 4 hours. They stripped him, unsearched him, photographed him, fingerprinted him again, gave him a medical exam, asked him questions about gang affiliations, mental health, history of violence. Liam answered mechanically. He was assigned an inmate number, 847392. That's what he was now, not a name, a number. They gave him prison-issued clothing, gray pants, gray shirt, white sneakers. Everything was too big. He looked like a kid playing dress-up, which, in a way, he was. A kid in an adult prison, the youngest inmate in the facility. That made him vulnerable, and everyone knew it, including Liam. He was escorted to his cell block, C block, maximum security. The hallway stretched endlessly, rows of cells on both sides. Men pressed against the bars, watching him walk past. Some called out, "Fresh meat." "Baby face?" "You lost, kid?" Liam kept his eyes forward. I'd tried to look tough, but his hands were shaking. The guard stopped at cell 217. "This is you," he said flatly. The door slid open with a metallic clang. Liam stepped inside. The door closed behind him immediately. The sound echoed. Final. Absolute. He was locked in. The cell was 8 feet by 10 feet. A metal bunk bolted to the wall, a small metal desk, a toilet with no seat, a tiny sink. That was it. That was everything. Liam sat on the bunk. The mattress was thin and hard. He could feel the metal frame beneath it. He looked around his cell. Gray walls. A small window near the ceiling with bars across it. The window showed a sliver of sky. That's all he'd see of the outside world now. A sliver. He thought about his old bedroom, his gaming setup, his comfortable bed, his posters, his freedom. It all felt like a dream now. Like it belonged to someone else. Someone who was an inmate, 847392. He lay down and stared at the ceiling. There were scratches and marks etched into the concrete, messages from previous occupants, names, dates, tallies, evidence that people had been here before him, evidence that people survived this, or at least existed through it. That first night was the longest of Liam's life. The sounds were overwhelming. Metal doors clanging, men shouting, someone screaming in the distance, footsteps echoing down hallways. The hum of fluorescent lights that never turned off completely. Liam pulled the thin blanket over his head and tried to block it out, but he couldn't. The noise was inside him now, inside his head. He thought about Khloe. For the first time in weeks, he really thought about her. Not about getting caught, not about the trial, but about her, about what he'd done, About the moment he'd watched the light leave her eyes. He'd felt powerful then, in control, invincible. Now he felt small, trapped, helpless. He wondered if this was karma, if this was what he deserved. The next morning came too soon. A buzzer sounded at 5:30, loud, jarring. Liam sat up, disoriented. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then he remembered. The cell door slid open. A voice over the intercom. "Breakfast. You have 15 minutes." Liam stood and walked out into the hallway. Other inmates were already moving toward the cafeteria. He followed, keeping his head down. The cafeteria was massive, hundreds of men in gray uniforms sitting at long metal tables. The noise was deafening. Liam got in line. A guard handed him a tray, powdered eggs, a piece of toast, a carton of milk. So he looked for somewhere to sit. Every table seemed full. Eyes followed him, predatory eyes, calculating eyes. He found a spot at the end of a table and sat down. He didn't look at anyone, just focused on his food, but he could feel eyes on him. Someone sat down across from him. Liam glanced up. The man was older, maybe 40, heavily tattooed, scars across his knuckles. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You're the kid?" the man said. "The one who killed that girl." Liam didn't respond. The man leaned forward. "You think you're tough? You think you're going to make it in here?" Liam's jaw tightened. "Leave me alone." The man laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "You're going to learn real quick, kid. In here, you're nobody, and nobody survives alone." He stood and walked away. Liam's hands were shaking. He couldn't eat. He just sat there until the buzzer sounded and everyone filed out. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Liam learned the rhythms of prison life: wake up, breakfast, recreation yard, lunch, work detail, dinner, lockdown, repeat. Every day the same. A monotonous, suffocating routine. He kept to himself as much as possible, didn't join any groups, didn't make friends, didn't trust anyone. But isolation came with its own dangers. He was targeted. Small things at first. Someone stole his lunch tray, someone spit in his food, someone tripped him in the hallway. Then bigger things. A fight in the yard. 3 guys jumped him, beat him badly. Guards broke it up, but not before Liam took a fist to the face that left his eyes swollen shut for a week. He didn't fight back. He just curled up and took it. Here the prison psychologist called him in for an evaluation. Dr. Miles Chen was a soft-spoken man in his 50s. He'd worked in the prison system for 20 years. He'd seen every kind of inmate: killers, rapists, thieves, men who were broken, men who were evil, men who were both. He looked at Liam across his desk. "How are you adjusting?" he asked. Liam shrugged. "Fine." Dr. Chen made a note. "You've been in 2 fights in 3 months. You've been placed in solitary twice. That doesn't sound fine." Liam didn't respond. Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Liam, I've read your file. I know what you did. I know what you were convicted of, but my job isn't to judge you. It's to help you survive this." Liam looked up. "Why would you help me?" Dr. Chen didn't blink. "Because even people who've done terrible things are still people. And you're going to be here for the rest of your life. That's a long time to carry guilt, to carry anger, to carry whatever it is you're feeling." Liam's voice was quiet. "I don't feel anything." Dr. Chen studied him. "I don't believe that. I think you feel a lot. You're just afraid to admit it." Liam looked away. The session ended shortly after, but Dr. Chen's words stayed with him. He went back to his cell and lay on his bunk. And for the first time since the sentencing, he let himself cry. Not for Khloe, not really, but for himself, for the life he'd lost, for the future that would never come. He cried until there were no tears left. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, life moved on. Khloe's family tried to rebuild. Diana went to therapy twice a week. She joined a support group for parents who'd lost children to violence. It helped, on a little, but the pain never fully went away. It just became part of her, a permanent scar on her soul. Robert threw himself into work. He started a foundation in Khloe's name, the Khloe Martin Scholarship Fund. It provided money for students who wanted to pursue medicine, students like Khloe had been. It gave him purpose, a way to honor her memory, a way to make sure she wasn't forgotten. They held an annual 5K run in her honor. Hundreds of people showed up the first year, thousands the second. Khloe's story had touched people, and her legacy was growing. At Riverside High, a memorial was erected, a bench in the school's garden with a plaque that read, "In loving memory of Khloe Martin, gone too soon, never forgotten." Students would sit there during lunch, some to remember her, some just to have a quiet place to think. Emma, Khloe's best friend, graduated and went to college. She studied criminal justice. She wanted to become a detective. She wanted to help solve cases like Khloe's, to give other families the closure that her friend's family had fought so hard to get. She carried a photo of Khloe in her wallet, and every time she doubted herself, every time school got hard or life got overwhelming, she looked at that photo. And she remembered why she was doing this. Back in prison, Liam's life continued its bleak march forward. A year passed, then 2, then 5. He aged in that place, physically and mentally. His face hardened, his eyes lost whatever spark of youth they'd once held. He got into more fights, spent more time in solitary, built walls around himself that no one could penetrate. He stopped seeing Dr. Chen, stopped participating in any programs. He just existed, a ghost moving through gray hallways. Some inmates forgot he was even there. Others remembered exactly who he was, the kid who killed a girl and smiled about it. That reputation followed him, defined him, became him. On the 10th anniversary of Khloe's death, a journalist requested an interview with Liam. It was for a podcast about juvenile offenders tried as adults. Liam agreed. He didn't know why. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he wanted someone to listen. The interview took place in a small room with cameras and recording equipment. The journalist, a woman named Sarah Winters, sat across from him. "Liam, you've been in prison for 10 years now. You were 17 when you were convicted. You're 27 now. How do you feel about what you did?" Liam looked at her. His face was blank. "I don't think about it." Sarah frowned. "You don't think about Khloe Martin?" Liam's jaw tightened. "What's the point? She's dead. I'm in here. Thinking about it doesn't change anything." Sarah leaned forward. "Do you feel remorse?" Liam was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "I don't know what I feel. I've been locked in a cage for 10 years. I don't feel anything anymore." Sarah pressed. "If you could go back, would you do things differently?" Liam looked down at his hands, hands that had once been smooth. Now they were scarred and calloused. "Of course," he said quietly. "But I can't, so what does it matter?" The interview was released a month later. It went viral. People were outraged. They called Liam cold, unfeeling, a monster. Others felt sympathy, argued that 10 years in prison had broken him, that he was a product of a system that didn't rehabilitate, only punished. The debate raged online, but Liam didn't see any of it. He was back in his cell, back in his routine, back in the endless gray. And somewhere in a cemetery on the edge of Riverside, Khloe Martin rested beneath a white marble headstone. Fresh flowers were placed there every week, by her parents, by Emma, by people who'd never met her but were moved by her story. The inscription read, "Khloe Rose Martin, beloved daughter, loyal friend, forever 16. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree that shaded her grave. Birds sang in the branches. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Life continued. The world kept turning. But Khloe's story, and the boy who took it from her, would never be forgotten. 15 years into his sentence, Liam Turner was transferred to a different facility, Redstone Correctional. It was older than Coldwater, harsher, the cells were smaller, the inmates more violent, the guards more indifferent. The transfer happened without warning. One morning, guards came to his cell, told him to pack his things, not that he had much, and let him out in chains. He didn't ask why. He'd learned long ago not to ask questions. Answers didn't change anything. He was loaded onto a transport bus with a dozen other inmates. They drove for 6 hours. No one spoke. They just stared out the windows at a world they no longer belonged to. Freedom passing by like a dream they couldn't quite remember. Redstone was brutal from day one. The hierarchy was established and vicious. Gangs controlled everything: protection, food, contraband. If you weren't affiliated, you were prey. Liam had managed to stay neutral at Coldwater. He'd kept his head down, minded his business, taken his beatings when they came. But Redstone didn't allow neutrality. Within his first week, he was approached by a shot caller from the Aryan Brotherhood, a massive man covered in white supremacist tattoos. His name was Pike. He cornered Liam in the shower. "You're either with us or against us, kid," Pike said, his voice echoing off the tile. "And if you're against us, you won't last a month." Liam looked at him, exhausted, beaten down. "I'm not joining anything." Pike smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Wrong answer. The beating came that night. 3 men jumped him in his cell after lockdown. Guards didn't come. They never did when it was gang business. Liam took the beating silently. He didn't scream, didn't beg. He'd just endured. When it was over, he lay on the cold concrete floor, blood pooling beneath him. He couldn't see out of his left eye. His ribs were broken, his breathing shallow. He thought maybe he'd die right there. Part of him hoped he would, but he didn't. He crawled onto his bunk and passed out. The next morning, a guard found him and called the infirmary. They patched him up, asked no questions, sent him back to his cell. That's how it worked in Redstone. Dr. Chen had retired, but Redstone had its own psychologist, Dr. Angela Torres. She was younger than Chen, tougher. She'd grown up in rough neighborhoods and understood violence in a way Chen never had. She called Liam in after the infirmary incident. "You're going to get yourself killed," she said bluntly. Liam shrugged. His face was still swollen. "Maybe, Doctor." Torres leaned back in her chair. "You've been in here 15 years. You have the rest of your life ahead of you. A long, miserable life, but still life. You want to spend it getting beaten every week?" Liam looked at her. "What do you want me to do? Join a gang? Become one of them?" Dr. Torres shook her head. "I want you to survive, however you have to." Liam thought about that conversation for days. Survival? What did that even mean in a place like this? He'd been surviving for 15 years. And for what? He was 32 years old. He'd spent half his life in prison. He'd never held a real job, never had a real relationship, never experienced adult life. He was frozen in time, forever the 17-year-old kid who thought he was smarter than everyone. But he wasn't that kid anymore. That kid was gone, or killed by routine and brutality and the crushing weight of forever. What remained was something else, something harder, something colder. He made a decision. He wouldn't join a gang, but he wouldn't be passive either. He started working out, lifting weights in the yard, building muscle, building strength. If they were going to come at him, he'd be ready. The fights continued, but now Liam fought back. He didn't win often, but he didn't go down easy. And slowly, grudgingly, he earned a measure of respect. Not friendship, not protection, but respect. The kind that came from refusing to break, from taking punishment and standing back up. Pike eventually left him alone. There were easier targets, weaker men. Liam wasn't worth the effort anymore. He settled into a new routine. Work detail in the prison laundry. meals alone, our hours in the yard lifting weights, reading in his cell at night. He read everything he could get his hands on, books, magazines, old newspapers. It was the only escape he had, the only way to leave Redstone without leaving his cell. One day a letter arrived. It was forwarded from Coldwater. Liam didn't get mail. Ever. He looked at the return address. It was from Emma, Khloe's best friend. His hand shook as he opened it. The letter was short, handwritten. The ink was smudged in places, like she'd been crying while she wrote it. Liam, I don't know why I'm writing this. I've started this letter 100 times and thrown it away. But I need to say something. I need you to know what you took from us. Khloe was my best friend. She was the best person I knew. And you killed her. You took her from her family. From me. From everyone who loved her. I've spent 15 years trying to understand why. Trying to make sense of it. But I can't. Because there is no sense to it. The letter continued. I became a detective because of you. Because of what you did. I wanted to make sure other families got justice. I've worked dozens of cases, solved murders, put killers away, and every single time I think of Khloe. I think of you. I don't know if you feel remorse. I don't know if you're even capable of it, but I hope you do. I hope every day in that prison you think about what you did. I hope her face haunts you, because she haunts me. Every single day. The letter was signed simply, Emma. Liam read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it under his mattress. He didn't know how to feel. Anger? Guilt? Shame? All of it? None of it? He lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in years he let himself remember Khloe's face. Really remember it. Not the crime scene photos, not the courtroom images, but her. The girl, smiling in her school photo, the girl with the golden future. He thought about the moment he'd sent her that message, the moment he'd lured her into the woods, the moment he'd made the decision that destroyed both their lives. He'd told himself it was curiosity, that he'd wanted to know what it felt like. But that wasn't true, not really. The truth was darker, more pathetic. He'd felt powerless, invisible, like his life didn't matter, and he'd wanted to matter. He'd wanted to feel important, in control, powerful. So he'd taken it from her, stolen her power, her future, her life. And in doing so, he'd destroyed his own. He was a black hole, a void. He'd consumed her light and been left with nothing but darkness. And now, 32 years old, sitting in a cell in one of the harshest prisons in the state, he finally understood. He was the architect of his own hell. Years continued to pass. Liam turned 40, then 45. His hair started to gray at the temples. His body, once strong from lifting weights, began to ache. Prison aged you faster than the outside world. The stress, the violence, the terrible food, the lack of sunlight. Men in their 50s looked 70. Men in their 60s were ancient. Liam watched older inmates die. Heart attacks, strokes, stabbings, suicides. Death was a constant presence in Redstone. It hung in the air like smoke. Some men welcomed it. Others fought it tooth and nail. Liam didn't know which camp he was in. Like he just kept moving forward, one day at a time, because that's all there was. Outside, the world changed. Technology advanced. Social media evolved. Khloe's case became a true crime phenomenon. Podcasts dedicated episodes to it. YouTubers made videos analyzing the trial. TikTokers told her story in 60-second clips. She became more famous in death than she ever was in life. Her face was everywhere. And so was Liam's. His mugshot, his courtroom smirk, the selfie he'd taken. They were shared millions of times. He became a symbol, a cautionary tale, an example of evil. Comment sections filled with opinions. Most called for his death. Some argued for rehabilitation. Others debated whether trying juveniles as adults was just. Liam knew none of this. He was cut off from it all, living in a time capsule, frozen in 2026. And on the 30th anniversary of Khloe's death, a documentary was released. It featured interviews with detectives, prosecutors, jurors, and Khloe's family. Diana and Robert, now in their 70s, sat side by side and told their story. Diana's hair was white, her face lined with grief, but her voice was still strong. "We think about Khloe every single day," she said. "We wonder who she would have become, what she would have accomplished. We were robbed of watching her grow up, of walking her down the aisle, of meeting our grandchildren. All of that was taken from us." Robert added, "Liam Turner destroyed our family, but he didn't destroy Khloe's legacy. She lives on in the scholarship, in the memorial, in the hearts of everyone who knew her. She'll never be forgotten." The documentary ended with a question. Should Liam Turner ever be released? It sparked national debate. Some argued that 30 years was enough, that he'd been a child when he committed the crime, that people could change. Others argued that he'd shown no remorse, that he'd planned and executed a brutal murder, that he deserved to die in prison. Polls were conducted, town halls were held, the debate raged. But in the end, it didn't matter. The law was clear. Life without parole meant exactly that. No release, no second chances, no redemption. Liam would die in Redstone, and everyone, including Liam, knew it. Liam Turner was 52 years old when he finally broke. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, nothing special about the day. Same breakfast, same routine, same gray walls closing in. He was in the recreation yard, sitting alone on a bench, watching younger inmates play basketball. Their voices echoed across the concrete. Laughter, trash talk, the sounds of men who still had some spark of life left in them. Liam watched them and felt nothing. Just emptiness, a vast hollow void where a person used to be. He'd been in prison for 35 years, more than twice as long as he'd been free. He couldn't remember what real food tasted like, couldn't remember the feeling of grass under his feet, couldn't remember being anything other than inmate 847392. Something inside him snapped. He stood up abruptly and walked back to his cell. His hands were shaking. His breathing was shallow. He felt like the walls were pressing in on him, suffocating him. He paced back and forth in the tiny space. 8 feet one direction. Turn. At 8 feet back. Turn. Over and over. His mind was racing, images flashing, Khloe's face, the courtroom, his mother crying, the judge's gavel, the transport van, 35 years of gray walls and metal bars and fluorescent lights. He couldn't do this anymore. He couldn't exist like this. Not for another day. Not for another 35 years. He sat on his bunk and put his head in his hands. And for the first time since he was 17 years old, he prayed, not for freedom, not for forgiveness, just for it to end. A guard found him an hour later, still sitting in the same position. The guard called for medical. They took him to the infirmary. Dr. Torres was called in. She sat across from him in a small examination room. Liam looked older than 52. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken. Prison had consumed him. "Talk to me." "Liam," she said gently. Liam shook his head. "What's there to say? I'm going to die in here. We both know it." Dr. Torres nodded. "Yes, you are. But you're not dead yet. You have today and tomorrow and the day after that. What you do with those days is up to you." Liam laughed bitterly. "Do with them? I'm in a cage. What can I possibly do?" Dr. Torres leaned forward. "You can stop running from what you did. You can face it, really face it. Not the legal consequences. You're already living those. I'm talking about the emotional consequences. The moral ones." Liam looked at her. "You want me to feel guilty? I felt guilty for 35 years. It doesn't change anything." Dr. Torres shook her head. "Guilt isn't the same as accountability. Guilt is about you, about how you feel. Accountability is about her, about Khloe. About acknowledging what you took from her family, from the world." Liam was silent, Dr. Torres continued. You've spent 35 years in survival mode, just trying to get through each day. I understand that, but maybe it's time to do more than survive. Maybe it's time to actually reckon with what you did. Liam went back to his cell that night with Dr. Torres's words echoing in his mind. Reckoning. What did that even mean? He lay on his bunk and thought about Khloe. Really thought about her, not as a victim in a case file, but as a person. She'd been 16, just a kid, with dreams and plans and a whole life ahead of her. And he'd taken all of that, erased it, ended it, because he'd wanted to feel powerful, because he'd been curious, because he'd been a selfish, narcissistic monster who thought only about himself. And the weight of it crashed down on him. 35 years of denial, of walls, of emotional distance. It all came crumbling down, and he wept. Deep, racking sobs that came from somewhere ancient and broken inside him. He thought about her parents, Diana and Robert. He'd seen them in court, seen their faces when the verdict was read, seen Diana's pain when she gave her victim impact statement. He'd looked away then, refused to let it touch him. But now, 35 years later, he let himself feel it. The enormity of what he'd done to them. He hadn't just killed their daughter. He'd killed their future, their joy, their hope. He'd left a wound that would never heal. And for what? For a moment of power? For a sick curiosity? For nothing. Absolutely nothing. He'd destroyed multiple lives for nothing. The realization was crushing. He curled into himself on the thin mattress and wished he could take it back. All of it. He'd give anything to go back to that morning, to delete that message, to let Khloe walk to school safely, to choose differently. But he couldn't. Time only moved forward, and the past was written in stone. The next morning, Liam requested to speak with Dr. Torres again. She came to his cell. "I want to write a letter," he said quietly, "to Khloe's parents. I don't know if they'll read it. I don't know if they should, but I need to write it." Dr. Torres nodded. "I think that's a good idea. But Liam, you need to understand something. This letter isn't about you feeling better. It's not about easing your guilt. It's about acknowledging their pain, about taking full responsibility. Can you do that?" Liam nodded. "I think so. I want to try." "Doctor." Torres provided him with paper and a pen, and Liam began to write. It took him 3 days to finish the letter. He wrote draft after draft, crossing out lines, starting over, trying to find words adequate for the inadequate. Finally, he had something. It wasn't perfect. Nothing could be, but it was honest. It read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Martin, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to care, but I need to say it anyway. I killed your daughter. I planned it. I executed it. I destroyed her life and yours. I've spent 35 years in prison, and it's not enough. It will never be enough. No punishment could ever equal what I took from you. I was 17 when I did it. I thought I was smart. I thought I was in control. I thought my age would protect me. I was wrong about all of it. But most of all, I was wrong to think I had the right to take Khloe's life." The letter continued. "I don't remember much about who I was back then. That person feels like a stranger to me now. But I remember what I did. I remember every detail, and I've carried it with me every single day for 35 years. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for sympathy. I don't deserve that either. I'm just asking that you know I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. Not because I got caught, not because I'm in prison, but because I took your daughter from you, because I ended a beautiful life that had so much potential, because I caused pain that can never be healed. I know sorry doesn't mean anything. Words are cheap, but they're all I have. I'm sorry. I will be sorry for the rest of my life. And when I die in this prison, I hope Khloe finds peace. I hope you find peace. I hope somehow, somewhere, there's healing, even if I never get to be part of it. Sincerely, Liam Turner. He gave the letter to Dr. Torres. She read it carefully. Then she looked at him. This is good, Liam. It's honest. But you need to understand they may not respond. They may throw it away without reading it, and that's their right. Liam nodded. I know. I just need them to have the option. That's all. Dr. Torres forwarded the letter through official channels. It took 3 weeks to reach Diana and Robert Martin. When it arrived, Diana held the envelope in her hands for a long time. She recognized the prison stamp, the inmate number. She knew immediately who it was from. Robert stood beside her. You don't have to open it, he said quietly. Diana nodded. I know. But I think I need to. She opened the envelope carefully, pulled out the handwritten pages, and began to read. Robert watched her face as she read, watched the tears start to fall. When she finished, she handed it to him without a word. He read it too. They sat together in silence for a long time. Finally, Diana spoke. He says he's sorry. Her voice was hollow, empty. After 35 years, he says he's sorry. Robert put his arm around her. Do you believe him? Diana thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? Robert shook his head. Not really. Sorry doesn't bring her back. They sat together, holding each other, two people who'd been broken 35 years ago and never fully healed. The letter didn't change anything, but it existed. And somehow, that meant something, even if they didn't know what. Diana wrote back. It was a short letter, just a few lines. Liam, I received your letter. I don't forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. But I believe you're sorry, and I hope that brings you some measure of peace. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying that guilt for the rest of your life is a punishment in itself. Khloe would have been 51 this year. She would have been a doctor, a wife, a mother. She would have saved lives. You took all of that from her, from us, from the world. I hope you understand the weight of that. I hope you carry it until your last breath. That's all I have to say. Diana Martin. The letter reached Liam 2 weeks later. He read it sitting on his bunk, and when he finished, he folded it carefully and placed it with Emma's letter under his mattress. His only possessions. The only things that mattered. Something shifted in Liam after that exchange. He started attending group therapy sessions offered by the prison. He started talking, really talking, about his crime, about his guilt, about the life he'd destroyed. Other inmates listened. Some judged, some related. They all had their own demons, their own crimes, their own regrets. Liam wasn't special. He was just another broken man in a building full of broken men. But for the first time in decades, he wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending. He was just existing as he was, guilty, remorseful, condemned. And somehow that honesty was freeing, not in a way that brought happiness, but in a way that brought a kind of peace, the peace of accepting who he was and what he'd done. Years continued to pass. Liam turned 60. His hair was completely gray now. His body was failing. Arthritis in his knees, high blood pressure, the beginning of heart disease. The prison doctor told him he probably had 10 years left, maybe 15 if he was lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you looked at it. Liam received the news with quiet acceptance. He'd been in prison for 43 years. He'd lived longer inside than he had outside. This was his life. This was his death. And he'd made peace with it. He spent his days reading, writing in a journal, attending group sessions, helping younger inmates navigate the system, offering advice, sharing his story as a warning. I thought I was untouchable, he'd tell them. I thought being young meant I'd get away with it. I was wrong, and I've paid for that mistake every day since. On the 45th anniversary of Khloe's death, Liam was 62 years old, and Diana and Robert were in their 90s. Diana was in declining health. Robert cared for her at home with the help of nurses. They still visited Khloe's grave every week, still placed fresh flowers, still talked to her like she was sitting right there with them. The scholarship fund in her name had helped over 500 students go to college. Her legacy was alive, thriving, growing. She'd saved more lives through that scholarship than she ever could have as a doctor. Because those 500 students went on to become doctors, teachers, social workers, engineers. They went on to help others, to change the world. And all of it traced back to a 16-year-old girl who'd wanted to make a difference. Emma was now a retired detective. She'd solved over 200 cases in her career. She'd brought justice to countless families. She'd never married, never had kids. Her life had been consumed by her work, by her mission, by Khloe's memory. She visited the grave on the anniversary, placed flowers next to the ones Diana and Robert had left. She stood there for a long time, hands in her pockets, looking at the headstone. "I kept my promise," she said quietly. "I made sure they paid, all of them, every killer I caught them for you." The wind rustled through the oak tree. Birds sang in the branches. And somewhere, Emma liked to think, Khloe heard her. Back in Redstone, Liam sat in his cell. It was evening. The sun was setting beyond his small window. He could see a sliver of orange sky. He thought about Khloe. He thought about her every day now, not with the distance he'd maintained for so long, but with full, painful awareness. He thought about the girl she was, the woman she could have been, the lives she could have touched, all of it erased because of him. He picked up his journal and wrote, "Today marks 45 years since I killed Khloe Martin. 45 years since I destroyed her life and mine. I'm 62 years old. I'll die in this prison. And that's exactly what I deserve. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't ask for mercy. I just ask that she's remembered. Not because of me, but in spite of me. She deserved better. And I hope somehow her story helps someone, somewhere, make a better choice than I did." He closed the journal, lay down on his bunk, and stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling he'd stared at for 45 years. The same cracks, the same water stains, the same messages scratched into the concrete by men who came before him. He added his own message once, years ago, just 2 words etched into the wall beside his bunk. "I'm sorry." It was still there, faded, but visible, a permanent reminder, a confession carved in stone. And as the light faded from his window and darkness filled his cell, Liam closed his eyes. And for once, his dreams weren't haunted by Khloe's face. They were just empty, silent, nothing. And that, in its own way, was mercy. Liam Turner was 68 years old when his body finally began to surrender. It was a cold morning in February. He woke with a sharp pain in his chest that radiated down his left arm. He knew what it was. He'd seen enough men have heart attacks in prison to recognize the signs. He lay there for a moment, breathing shallowly, wondering if this was it. If this was how it would end. Alone in a cell. No family, no friends. Just a number on a door. He pressed the emergency button beside his bunk. An alarm sounded somewhere down the hall. Within minutes, guards arrived. They called for medical. The prison doctor rushed in with a portable EKG machine. Liam was having a heart attack. They stabilized him enough to transport him to the prison hospital wing, a more serious facility than the infirmary, with actual equipment and specialists. He spent 3 days in the hospital wing, tubes in his arms, monitors beeping steadily beside his bed. He drifted in and out of consciousness. In his waking moments, he stared at the white ceiling tiles and thought about his life. 68 years, 51 of them spent in prison. More than 3/4 of his existence had been behind bars. He'd never owned a car, never had a career, never traveled, never fell in love, never had children, never experienced any of the milestones that defined a normal life. His entire adult existence had been compressed into an 8x10 cell, and now it was ending. The doctor told him his heart was damaged, severely. He needed bypass surgery, but the state didn't approve expensive surgeries for lifers, especially elderly ones. They'd manage his symptoms with medication. But his time was limited, maybe a year, maybe 2. Liam was returned to his cell. Word spread quickly through the prison. The old man was dying. Some inmates didn't care. Death was common in Redstone. But others, particularly the younger ones who'd attended Liam's group therapy sessions, came to visit him. They'd sit outside his cell during recreation time and talk with him, ask him questions, seek advice. But Liam had become something of an elder statesman in the prison. Not respected exactly, but acknowledged. He was living proof of consequences, a cautionary tale with a pulse. He'd talk to them about choices, about how one decision could destroy everything. I was 17, he'd say, his voice weaker now, raspy. I thought I knew everything, thought I was invincible. I killed a girl because I was curious, because I wanted to feel powerful, and I threw my entire life away. Don't be me. Whatever you did to get in here, learn from it. Be better than I was. Some listened, some didn't. But Liam kept talking. It was the only thing he could do now, the only way he could possibly make any kind of meaning out of the wreckage of his life. Dr. Torres visited him regularly. She'd been his psychologist for over 30 years now. She was preparing to retire. Liam would likely be one of her last patients. They'd developed something close to a friendship over the decades, as close as a psychologist and inmate could get. She sat beside his bunk during one visit, noting how frail he'd become. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Liam managed a weak smile. "Like I'm dying." Dr. Torres didn't smile back. "You are. We both know that." Liam nodded. "I'm ready. I've been ready for a long time." Dr. Torres studied his face. "Do you have any regrets, besides the obvious?" Liam thought about it. "Everything. My whole life is a regret. But if you're asking if I regret taking responsibility, if I regret finally facing what I did, no. I don't regret that. It took me 35 years to get there, but I'm glad I did, even if it doesn't change anything." Dr. Torres made a note. "For what it's worth, Liam, I think you're a different person than the 17-year-old who came in here. I don't think that person exists anymore." Liam closed his eyes. "That person died a long time ago, but he killed a girl before he died. And that's what matters. That's what I'll be remembered for. Not the man I became, but the monster I was." News of Liam's declining health eventually reached the outside world. A journalist who'd covered the case decades earlier wrote an article. "Teen killer who laughed at judge now dying in prison." It was published online and went viral. Again, comment sections exploded. Some people expressed satisfaction. "Good. He deserves to die in there." "I hope it's painful." "He should have gotten the death penalty." Others expressed something different. Not sympathy exactly, but a kind of sad acknowledgement. "He's been in prison 51 years. He was just a kid when it happened. This is what happens when we try children as adults." 2 lives destroyed that day. The debate that had raged for decades reignited, but Liam didn't know about any of it. He was too sick to care. Diana Martin was 93 years old and bedridden when she heard the news. A nurse was reading her the news on a tablet when she saw the article. She stopped mid-sentence. Diana noticed. "What is it?" she asked, her voice weak. The nurse hesitated. "It's about Liam Turner. He's dying." Diana was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Read it to me." The nurse did. When she finished, Diana closed her eyes. Tears leaked from the corners. The nurse touched her hand gently. "Are you all right, Mrs. Martin?" Diana nodded slowly. I don't know how I feel. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, relief, something. But I just feel sad. For everyone. For Khloe. For us. Even for him. Isn't that strange?" The nurse shook her head. "I don't think so. I think that's human." Robert had passed away 3 years earlier. Heart failure. He'd lived long enough to see the scholarship fund flourish, long enough to know that Khloe's legacy was secure. But he'd never stopped grieving. Diana was alone now. Their house felt enormous and empty, filled with memories and ghosts. She spent most of her days in bed, looking at photos of Khloe as a baby, as a child, as the beautiful teenager she'd been. Diana would never see a photo of Khloe as an adult, as a bride, as a mother. Those photos didn't exist, would never exist. That loss was a constant aching wound that never healed. As some losses don't. Some pain doesn't fade with time. It just becomes part of who you are, a scar you carry forever. Emma heard the news too. She was 72 now, retired, living in a small house by the ocean. She'd never left the state, never fully escaped the shadow of Khloe's death. It had defined her entire life, her career, her choices, everything. When she read the article, she sat at her kitchen table for a long time, staring out at the water. She thought about calling Diana. But what would she say? After a while, she picked up her phone and composed a text. "I saw the news about Liam. I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm thinking about you, and about Khloe. Always about Khloe." She hit send. Diana responded an hour later. "Thank you, Emma. I'm thinking about her too. I never stop. Shall see you at the grave next week." Emma closed her eyes and let the tears come. Even after 51 years, it still hurt. Back in Redstone, Liam's condition deteriorated rapidly. The medication wasn't enough. His heart was failing. He was moved to the medical wing permanently. He spent his days in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, drifting in and out of consciousness. He had visitors now, not family. He had none. His mother had died 20 years earlier, alone and broken. But other inmates came. Dr. Torres came. A prison chaplain came regularly, offering spiritual comfort. Liam wasn't religious, never had been, but he listened anyway. The chaplain, Father Michael, was a kind man in his 60s. He'd worked in prisons for 40 years. "Do you believe in God, Liam?" he asked one afternoon. Liam shook his head weakly. "I don't know. I want to. I want to believe there's something after this, but I don't know if I deserve it." Father Michael sat beside the bed. "That's between you and God, not for me to judge, but I will say this. I've sat with a lot of dying men. Some go peacefully, some go in terror. The ones who find peace are the ones who've made amends, or at least tried to." Liam thought about the letters he'd written. To Diana, to Robert before he died, to Emma. Apologies that could never be adequate, words that could never undo what he'd done. "I tried," Liam whispered. "I tried to make amends. But how do you make amends for murder? How do you apologize for taking someone's life?" Father Michael was quiet. "You can't, not fully, but you can acknowledge it, carry it, and try to help others avoid your mistakes. That's all any of us can do. Learn, grow, change." Even at the end, Liam closed his eyes. "I'm not the same person I was at 17. That person was a monster. I don't know what I am now." Father Michael smiled gently. "You're a man who did a terrible thing, but also a man who spent 50 years paying for it, a man who finally took responsibility, a man who tried, in his own way, to be better. That's not redemption. I can't offer you that. But it's something. It's more than nothing." Liam opened his eyes and looked at the chaplain. "Thank you," he said quietly. Father Michael nodded. "Rest now. I'll be back tomorrow." He left, and Liam was alone with his thoughts again, Always alone, even surrounded by people. That was his punishment, not the bars, not the walls, but the loneliness, the isolation of knowing he could never truly connect with anyone because of what he'd done. One night, alone in the medical wing, Liam had a dream. He was 17 again, standing in the woods, but this time Khloe was standing there too, alive, whole. She looked at him with those clear, bright eyes. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was soft, not accusatory, just curious. Liam tried to answer but couldn't find words. Finally he said, "I don't know. I was stupid, selfish, cruel. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Khloe tilted her head. "What would you do differently?" Liam felt tears on his face. "Everything. I'd delete that message. I'd let you walk to school. I'd let you live your life. I'd give anything to take it back." Khloe smiled sadly. "But you can't?" Liam shook his head. "No, I can't." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I hope you find peace, Liam. I really do." And she turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Liam woke up gasping. His heart monitor was beeping erratically. A nurse rushed in. "Mr. Turner, are you all right?" He nodded, catching his breath. "Just a dream." The nurse checked his vitals and adjusted his medication. When she left, Liam lay there in the darkness, thinking about the dream, about Khloe's face, her words. "I hope you find peace." Did he deserve peace? He didn't think so. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe peace wasn't something you earned. Maybe it was something you accepted. A gift? A grace? He didn't know. He was too tired to figure it out. He closed his eyes and let himself drift. And for the first time in 51 years, he slept without nightmares. 3 weeks later, in the early hours of a Sunday morning, Liam Turner died. His heart simply stopped. The machines flatlined. A nurse noticed and called the doctor. But there was nothing to be done. He was gone. The doctor noted the time of death. 4:17 a.m. Liam was 68 years old. He'd spent 51 years, 3 months, and 12 days in prison. Nearly 3/4 of his life. The state processed his death like they processed everything. Clinically, efficiently. His body was taken to the morgue. An autopsy was performed. Cause of death? Cardiac arrest. His few possessions, 2 letters, a journal, some books, were cataloged and stored. No one claimed them. No one claimed his body either. After 30 days, he was cremated. His ashes were placed in a plain urn and stored in a state facility. Inmate 847392. Deceased. News of his death reached the media within hours. Another article, another wave of comments. Just good riddance. He got what he deserved. I hope he rots in hell, but also, he served his time. He was just a kid when it happened. This is sad for everyone involved. The cycle continued. The debate raged. But Liam was beyond it now. Beyond everything. Diana heard the news from the same nurse who'd been with her for years. "He's gone," the nurse said gently. Diana nodded. She didn't cry. She just stared out the window at the sky. "So much pain," she whispered. "So much lost. And for what?" The nurse didn't have an answer. There wasn't one. Emma learned about it from a news alert on her phone. She was sitting on her porch, watching the sunrise over the ocean. She read the headline, stared at it for a long time. Then she set the phone down and watched the waves. Life and death. Over and over. Endless cycles. She thought about Khloe, about the girl she'd been, the woman she'd never become, about Liam, the boy who destroyed everything, the man who died in prison, about justice, about punishment, about whether any of it mattered. She didn't have answers, just questions. Always questions. She picked up her phone and texted Diana. "He's gone," Diana responded a minute later. "I know. Rest well, Emma. I'm tired." Emma understood. They were all tired. 6 months after Liam's death, Diana Martin passed away in her sleep. She was 94 years old. She'd lived a long life, far longer than her daughter, but not a happy one. Not after September 14th, 51 years earlier, the day her world ended. Her funeral was well attended. Family, friends, former students who'd received the Khloe Martin Scholarship, people whose lives had been touched by Khloe's legacy. Emma was there, of course. She sat in the front row, holding Diana's photo, crying silently. After the service, Emma drove to the cemetery, to the plot where Khloe was buried, and now, beside her, was Diana's grave. Mother and daughter, together again. The headstone read, "Diana Elizabeth Martin, loving mother, forever devoted to Khloe." Emma knelt between the two graves. She placed flowers on both. "You're together now," she said quietly. "I hope you're at peace, both of you." She stayed there for a long time. The sun moved across the sky. Birds sang in the oak tree. The wind rustled through the leaves. Life continued. It always did. Emma finally stood, her knees aching, and walked back to her car. She drove home slowly, feeling the weight of 51 years. She was 73 now. Her own life was winding down. She'd lived it in Khloe's shadow, by choice, by necessity, by love. She had no regrets about that, but she was tired, so tired. She wondered how much longer she had, and she wondered if, when she died, she'd see Khloe again. She hoped so. She had so much to tell her. The Khloe Martin Scholarship Fund continued. It was managed now by a board of directors, people who'd never met Khloe but believed in her story, in her legacy. The fund had grown substantially over the decades. Donations poured in every year, from individuals, from corporations, from people who'd heard her story and wanted to help. By the time of Diana's death, the fund had provided scholarships to over 800 students. 800 lives changed. 800 futures made possible. All because of a 16-year-old girl who'd wanted to be a doctor, who'd wanted to save lives. In a way, she had, just not the way she'd imagined. Riverside High School still had Khloe's memorial bench. 51 years later, it was still there, still maintained. The plaque was polished regularly by the school's maintenance staff. Students still sat there. Most didn't know the full story, just that someone named Khloe had died. But some did. Some researched it, read about it, learned the history. And they'd sit on that bench and think about choices, about consequences, about how fragile life was, how quickly it could be taken away. The bench had become something more than a memorial. It had become a classroom, a place where lessons were learned, about violence, about justice, about the importance of every single life. True crime content about Khloe's case continued to be produced. Podcasts, YouTube videos, documentaries, TikTok deep dives. Each generation discovered the story anew, and each generation had opinions. Debates about whether trying juveniles as adults was just, whether life without parole was cruel and unusual punishment for someone so young, whether Liam had been a monster or a troubled kid who made a terrible mistake. The answers weren't simple. They never were. But the conversations were important. They made people think, made people question, made people examine their own beliefs about justice and punishment and redemption. And that perhaps was Khloe's true legacy. Not just the scholarship, but the conversations, the questions, the ongoing examination of what it meant to be human, to make mistakes, to face consequences. When Emma lived another 5 years after Diana's death, she spent those years quietly, writing a memoir, volunteering, visiting Khloe's grave every week. She never married, never had children. Khloe had been enough. The memory of her had filled Emma's life, given it purpose, direction, meaning. Emma's memoir was published when she was 78. It was called The Girl Who Never Got to Grow Up, A Best Friend's Story of Loss, Justice, and Legacy. It became a bestseller, not because it was sensational, but because it was honest, raw, real. Emma didn't hold back. She wrote about her grief, her anger, her obsession with justice, her career as a detective, and she wrote about Khloe, the real Khloe, not the victim in a crime story, but the girl, the friend, the person. The book's final chapter was about forgiveness. Emma admitted she'd struggled with it for decades. Could she forgive Liam? Should she? She wrote, "Forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of hatred. I don't know if I forgive Liam Turner. Some days I think I do. Some days I don't. But I've let go of the anger, because carrying it was killing me, just like prison killed him. We all suffered, Khloe most of all, but all of us. And at some point, you have to choose to live. Really live, not just exist in the shadow of tragedy. I think Khloe would want that for me, for all of us." The book resonated with thousands of people, survivors of violence, families of victims, people carrying their own grief and searching for a way forward. Emma died peacefully in her sleep at 79. She was found by a neighbor 2 days later. Her funeral was small but meaningful. Former colleagues from the police department, a few distant relatives, and representatives from the Khloe Martin Scholarship Fund. She was buried in the same cemetery as Khloe and Diana, not in the same plot, but nearby. Her headstone read, "Emma Rose Hayes, Detective, Friend, Guardian of Memory." And beneath that, a quote she'd chosen herself. She never forgot. The 3 graves formed a triangle, 3 lives forever connected by one horrible day 56 years earlier, but also connected by love, by friendship, by the refusal to let tragedy be the final word. Years continued to pass. Decades. The world changed. Technology advanced. Society evolved. New crimes happened. New tragedies. New headlines. Slowly, inevitably, Khloe Martin's case faded from the public consciousness. It was no longer trending, no longer viral. It became history. A footnote in the true crime archives. Something students might stumble across while researching criminal justice or juvenile law. But at Riverside High School, the bench remained. And every year on September 14th, a ceremony was held. A remembrance. Students, teachers, and community members gathered to honor Khloe's memory. To remember what happened. To recommit to making sure it never happened again. The ceremony always ended the same way, with a reading of Khloe's favorite poem, a poem about hope and resilience and the enduring power of the human spirit. On the 60th anniversary of Khloe's death, the ceremony was particularly well attended. Over 500 people. The current principal spoke. "We gather today to remember Khloe Martin, a girl most of us never met, but whose story has shaped this school and this community for 6 decades. Khloe wanted to save lives. She wanted to be a doctor. She never got that chance. But through the scholarship that bears her name, she's helped thousands of students pursue their dreams. Through the memorial that honors her, she reminds us every day that life is precious, that choices matter, that we are all responsible for each other. Khloe's life was cut short, but her impact endures, and as long as we remember her, she lives." Somewhere in that crowd was a 17-year-old girl, a student at Riverside High. She'd been researching Khloe's case for a history project. She'd read the articles, watched the documentaries, read Emma's memoir, and she'd been struck by something, by how similar Khloe was to her. Same age, same dreams, same ordinary life. It could have been her, could have been anyone. That realization had shaken her, made her aware of her own mortality in a way she'd never been before, made her aware of how precious every moment was, how quickly it could all be taken away. After the ceremony, she approached the bench, placed her hand on the plaque, and whispered, "I'll remember you, I promise." And she did, and so did others, generation after generation, students who sat on that bench, who read that plaque, who learned Khloe's story. They carried it forward, made sure she wasn't forgotten, made sure her death meant something. And in that way, Khloe Martin achieved a kind of immortality, not the kind she'd hoped for, not a life lived and celebrated, but a memory preserved, a lesson taught, a legacy that refused to die. She was forever 16, forever full of potential, forever a reminder of what was lost when violence stole a life, and forever a symbol of hope that even in tragedy, meaning could be found, purpose could be created, and love could endure, even when everything else was gone. 75 years after Khloe Martin's murder, Riverside had transformed into something she wouldn't recognize. The small town had grown into a sprawling suburb. The nature reserve where she died had been turned into a protected memorial park, the Khloe Martin Memorial Park. Winding paths had been installed, benches placed every 100 yards. Educational plaques told her story at key points along the trail. Families walked there on weekends. Joggers ran the paths at dawn. Children played in designated areas. Life flourished where death had once reigned. The exact spot where Khloe's body was found had been marked with a beautiful stone monument. Not gruesome, not morbid, but peaceful, respectful. The monument was a white marble column about 6 feet tall with Khloe's photo embedded in glass at the center. Around the photo were engraved words chosen by Diana before she died. Here stood a girl with dreams. Here fell an innocent. Here we remember that every life matters. Every choice has weight. Every moment is precious. Fresh flowers appeared there daily, left by strangers, by people who'd never known Khloe, but felt connected to her story. The monument had become something unexpected, a place of pilgrimage. People came from across the country, victims' families seeking solace, students studying criminal justice, true crime enthusiasts paying their respects, and troubled teenagers. Kids who saw themselves in Liam's story, kids who stood at a crossroads between choices. Many of them stood at that monument and made a different choice, chose differently, chose better. The Khloe Martin Scholarship Fund had grown beyond anyone's imagination. By the 75th anniversary, it had provided full scholarships to over 3,000 students. 3,000 lives changed, 3,000 futures made possible. Many of those students became doctors, just as Khloe had wanted to be. They worked in hospitals and clinics across the nation. They saved lives, thousands of lives, tens of thousands if you counted the ripple effect. Patients who survived because a doctor educated by Khloe's scholarship made the right diagnosis, found the right treatment, performed the right surgery. In that way, Khloe had saved more lives than she ever could have as a single physician. Her death, as horrible as it was, had created a legacy that touched millions. The scholarship board held a special ceremony on the 75th anniversary. They gathered at Riverside High School, in the auditorium where Khloe had once performed in school plays, where she'd received academic awards, where she'd laughed with friends and dreamed about her future. The auditorium was packed. Current scholarship recipients, alumni, donors, community members. The board president, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd received the scholarship 40 years earlier, stood at the podium. "I never met Khloe Martin," she began. "She died 34 years before I was born. But she changed my life. I grew up poor. My family couldn't afford college. But because of this scholarship, I became a doctor. I've spent my career working in underserved communities, treating people who otherwise wouldn't have access to health care. I've delivered babies, saved heart attack victims, diagnosed cancers early enough to cure them. And all of it traces back to Khloe." Dr. Chen's voice grew emotional. But this scholarship isn't just about money, it's about legacy. It's about taking something horrible and transforming it into something meaningful. Khloe's life was stolen. That will never be okay. That will never be just. But her death sparked something that has helped thousands of people, and that matters. It doesn't erase the tragedy, but it adds meaning to it. She paused, looking out at the audience. So today, on this 75th anniversary, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Khloe, for the dream you had. Thank you, Diana and Robert, for channeling your grief into something beautiful. Thank you, Emma, for never letting her be forgotten. And thank you to everyone here who's carried this legacy forward. We are all part of Khloe's story now, and we have a responsibility to honor it. The auditorium erupted in applause. People stood. Some were crying. The ceremony continued with testimonials from other scholarship recipients. A surgeon who'd pioneered a new cardiac procedure, a pediatrician working in refugee camps, a researcher developing treatments for rare diseases. Each one stood and said the same thing. I'm here because of Khloe Martin. The cumulative impact was staggering, overwhelming, proof that even the darkest tragedy could birth light, that even the most senseless violence could be transformed into purpose. It didn't make Khloe's death acceptable. Nothing could. But it made it mean something, and in a world full of meaningless suffering, that mattered. After the ceremony, attendees walked to the memorial park, thousands of people, a silent march through the streets of Riverside. They carried candles, photos of Khloe, signs that read, "Every life matters," and "Choose differently." When they reached the monument, they formed a circle around it. The sun was setting. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. Birds sang in the trees, the same trees that had witnessed Khloe's final moments 75 years earlier. Dr. Chen stepped forward and placed a single white rose at the base of the monument. "We remember," she said simply, and one by one others followed, placing flowers, lighting candles, standing in silence. The circle of light grew until the entire clearing glowed. Meanwhile, in a small town 3 states away, a 17-year-old boy named Marcus sat in his bedroom staring at his phone. He'd been planning something terrible, something violent. He'd written it all out, just like Liam had. He'd identified his target, made his plan. He felt powerless in his life, invisible, and he wanted to matter, wanted to be remembered, even if it was for something horrible. He'd been about to execute his plan. Tomorrow, at school. But tonight, for some reason, he'd started searching online, looking for stories about people like him, people who'd done what he was planning to do, and he'd found Khloe Martin's story. He'd read about Liam Turner, about the smirk, about the life sentence, about dying alone in prison at 68. While Marcus kept reading, he found Emma's memoir, read it in one sitting, read about the pain, the lifelong grief, the destroyed families. He watched documentaries, listened to podcasts, and slowly, over the course of hours, something shifted in him. He saw himself in Liam, saw where that path led: prison, isolation, death, nothing, no glory, no meaning, just suffering for everyone. He thought about the person he was planning to hurt, really thought about them, not as a target, not as a symbol, but as a person with a family, with dreams, with a future, just like Khloe had been, just like he was. Marcus deleted his plan, every word. Then he deleted his search history. He sat on his bed and cried. Not because he was caught. He wasn't. No one knew what he'd been planning, but because he'd come so close, so terrifyingly close. The next morning, Marcus went to school. He walked past his intended target in the hallway. Their eyes met briefly. The person smiled and nodded. A simple greeting. Marcus nodded back, and he felt something crack open inside him. He didn't go through with it. He chose differently. After school, he went to the counselor's office and asked to talk to someone. He didn't confess what he'd been planning. but he talked about feeling angry, invisible, powerless. The counselor listened, really listened, and she connected him with resources, therapy, support groups, mentorship programs. Marcus started the long, difficult journey of healing, of finding better ways to matter, better ways to be seen. It wasn't easy, but it was possible, and Khloe's story, in a way, had saved his life, and saved the life of his would-have-been victim. Marcus's story wasn't unique. Over the 75 years since Khloe's death, countless others had been influenced by her case, some overtly, like Marcus, others subtly. Teachers who taught about consequences, parents who talked to their kids about choices, legislators who crafted better laws, mental health professionals who recognized warning signs. Khloe's story had become woven into the fabric of cultural consciousness, a reference point, a cautionary tale, a reminder. And while it was impossible to quantify exactly how many tragedies had been prevented, how many lives had been saved, the impact was undeniable, real, measurable in the silence of violence that didn't happen, in the lives that continued, in the futures that remained intact. At Riverside High School, and the memorial bench had been replaced 3 times over 75 years. Wear and weather took their toll, but each time it was rebuilt. Exactly the same. Same design, same plaque, same words. Current students still sat there, still learned Khloe's story. The school had also implemented a comprehensive violence prevention program, named appropriately the Khloe Martin Initiative. It included mental health screenings, conflict resolution training, anonymous reporting systems, early intervention protocols. The program had been so successful that it was adopted by schools across the state, then across the country, thousands of schools, millions of students, all benefiting from lessons learned in Khloe's wake. On the evening of the 75th anniversary, a special broadcast aired. On a documentary titled 75 Years of Impact, The Khloe Martin Legacy. It traced the entire story, from that horrible morning in September to the present day. It interviewed scholarship recipients, showed the memorial park, featured Marcus, now 45 years old and a counselor himself, talking about how Khloe's story had saved him. The documentary ended with a powerful segment, a visualization of impact. The screen showed Khloe's photo, then lines extending out from it, each line representing a scholarship recipient, then lines extending from them, representing lives they'd saved or helped, then lines from those people, and so on. The web grew, expanded, until it covered the entire screen. Thousands of lines, tens of thousands, millions of connections, all tracing back to one 16-year-old girl. When the narrator's voice spoke over the visualization. Khloe Martin lived for 16 years, but her impact has spanned 75. Through the scholarship bearing her name, she's helped educate 3,000 doctors, teachers, social workers, and leaders. Through the memorial park, she's provided a place of healing for countless families. Through the violence prevention programs inspired by her story, she's helped save innumerable lives. Khloe wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to save lives. She never got that chance. But in death, she's done exactly what she set out to do. She's saved lives, thousands of them, and her legacy will continue for generations to come, because the best way to honor a life stolen is to create meaning from it, to transform tragedy into purpose, to ensure that the story never ends with death, but with hope. The screen faded to black. Then text appeared. In memory of Khloe Rose Martin, September 1st, 2009 to September 14th, 2025, forever 16, forever remembered, forever making a difference. The documentary was watched by millions. It won awards. It sparked conversations in classrooms and living rooms across the nation. It reminded people that every life matters, that every choice has consequences. That justice isn't just about punishment, it's about prevention, about healing, about creating a better future. And it reminded them that even in the darkest moments, even when evil seems to win, good can emerge. Purpose can be found. Legacies can be built. As the 75th anniversary drew to a close, the candles at the Memorial Park burned down to nothing. The crowd dispersed. Families went home. The park grew quiet. But Khloe's monument remained, standing tall, illuminated by solar-powered lights that would shine all night. Her photos smiled out into the darkness. Forever young, forever full of potential, forever a reminder. The wind rustled through the oak trees, the same trees that had witnessed her death. But now they witnessed something else. Life, memory, hope, the transformation of tragedy into legacy. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, perhaps Khloe knew. Perhaps she understood that her death, as horrible as it was, had not been in vain. The story of Khloe Martin and Liam Turner would be told for generations. Not because it was sensational, not because it was entertaining, but because it was important. It contained lessons about choices and consequences, about justice and mercy, and about the fragility of life and the enduring power of legacy. It reminded people that monsters aren't born. They're made, through choices, through moments, through decisions that seem small but carry infinite weight. And it reminded them that one life, even one cut tragically short, can touch millions, can change the world, can matter in ways impossible to predict. 75 years after a 17-year-old boy made the worst decision of his life, after he laughed in a courtroom thinking he was untouchable, after he spent 51 years in prison paying for that choice, after he died alone and unmourned, the verdict was finally clear. Justice had been served, not just in the legal sense, not just in his life sentence and lonely death, but in the transformation of tragedy into purpose, in the thousands of lives saved and changed, are in the conversations sparked, in the prevention achieved, in the memory preserved. Liam Turner had thought being 17 would protect him. He was wrong. But more importantly, he'd thought his crime would define the story. He was wrong about that too. The story wasn't about him. It never was. It was about Khloe, about her life, her dreams, her impact, about a girl who wanted to save lives and, through the tragedy of her death, had saved thousands. That was the real verdict. That was the final chapter. Not punishment or revenge or suffering, but purpose, meaning, legacy. And as the sun rose on the 76th year after Khloe Martin's death, her story continued. Carried forward by the students who received her scholarship, by the families who found healing in her memorial, by the kids who made better choices because they heard her story, by all of us who refuse to let tragedy be the end, who insist on finding light in darkness, who believe that even when evil wins a battle, goodness can still win the war. That's justice. That's legacy. That's how a 16-year-old girl who died 75 years ago continues to save lives today. And will continue tomorrow, and forever. Because some stories never end. They just keep echoing. Through time, through hearts, through the choices we make. Choose wisely. Choose kindly. Choose life. For Khloe, for all of us. The verdict is in, justice found its way, and love endured. If you believe in the power of second chances and first choices, subscribe now. Share this story. Let it remind someone that their decisions matter, that life is precious, that justice, a real justice, isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the story doesn't end in darkness. It ends in light, in memory, in legacy. Khloe's story will never be forgotten. Make sure yours is worth remembering